Live.
What's up?
Talk about trades episode 9. We have Professor Craig Blanchfield here.
Good to be here.
Thank you for joining us.
Sir.
And of course,
Absolutely.
Thomas Esteta, as always. So usually Thomas does the intros. I'll do the intro this time just because this is actually my old finance professor from U of H. So we definitely appreciate you joining us. I personally learned a lot from your class. So
Good.
Did you get an A, by the way?
Of course.
Yeah, okay.
Of course. I mean, come on, it's me. But,
Yeah.
I did learn a lot about finance, about the way just things actually work as opposed to how I thought things worked. You give a very down to earth presentation of the way the finance market works and markets in general. So I definitely appreciate you coming on just to talk about finance and the world, I guess, around us right now.
Sure.
Because I know the world is crazy, and it has been crazy for several years, if not decades. You could say. So I'd love to get just your perspective on things, and
Sure.
of course, like your backstory. So I mean. Obviously, you teach at UH. You got your master's at UH in finance,
That's right.
right? And you got your undergrad at Boston College,
Correct.
in economics, right?
Yes.
Cool. And you're also a chartered CFA. So
I am a CFA charter holder.
yeah,
Yes.
So very cool.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about just your background, your history, from wherever you'd like to start, wherever you think's relevant. From the womb to now, basically.
Fair enough. I'm originally from Manchester, New Hampshire. It's an old mill town, but I probably grew up. Make sure I get close to the mic.
Yeah.
I would characterize my upbringing kind of lower middle class at best. My parents didn't own a house. The first time that they bought a house, I was a senior in high school, which was unusual. And that kind of upbringing, a couple things come to mind from that. Very humble beginnings, I guess.
Yeah.
Just how naive I was about not just, we're going to talk a lot about finance and investing, and that's fine, but just that, but the world in general, just being very naive about it. And also learning, my parents were great teachers, but fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of them being great teachers was about things, what not to do. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we learn that way, right? We learn, well, that doesn't look good. I don't want to. Yeah. I don't want to do the same as that. Grew up there, again, kind of lower middle class.
Right on the cusp.
And really didn't have much of a worldview or understood what was going on in the world about, finance, money, careers. I think that but my eyes got open on that probably when my brother, I have one older brother, he's 2 years older, went to high school. The high school we went to brought in students from a neighboring town that was upper middle class and above.
Okay.
That's where the professionals live. That's where the doctors, the lawyers, the entrepreneurs, the people that were successful financially.
Right.
So my brother had friends right out of the gate his freshman year, and this was just an exposure to a different world, and really accelerated my interest. I always kind of had an interest in money and saving and understanding that, but seeing real people in the real world, my friends, my brother's friends' parents, and then when I went to school, my friends' parents. It was just a much different perspective in general. So, I understood probably around that time that getting an education was important.
Yeah.
Because these people in general are all educated, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, and my parents didn't get college educated. My mother was 50, and my father was early mid 40s, before they got a bachelor's degree. So,
Okay. Wait, but they got their bachelor's degree
eventually.
Still.
Yes.
That's pretty awesome. Still.
Yeah. Definitely a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
Not a good time of life to do it. Probably,
Sure.
It took my mother longer. She switched programs kind of midway through.
Right.
So that took longer, was more of a commitment. But then when it was time for me to apply for school, I had basically no guidance. Like I see other parents talking about it now, and they're getting tutors for SATs and help with applications.
Yes.
I walked into a high school at 8 o'clock or whatever Saturday morning and sat down and took the SATs. There was no prep.
Right.
There was no tutor. There was no nothing. My parents didn't even know where I was. Probably didn't even know where I was that morning.
Yeah.
Maybe I was going to work or whatever. But took the SATs. Figured out where I wanted to apply. I mean, we did do a college road trip, but no help or oversight in terms of where I applied, what I was going to do. So pretty open-ended, good, bad, or otherwise. Ended up going to BC, Boston College, in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts.
Okay.
I originally started as a biology / pre-med major, but I think pretty early on you run into organic chemistry, and that was a hard no for me.
Oh, yeah.
So I pivoted, liked economics, ended up graduating with my bachelor's degree in economics. Actually moved back home and worked with my father in a medical supply business in New Hampshire for 4 or 5 years, and then moved to Texas.
Okay.
With, at the time, my girlfriend, who is now my wife.
Congratulations.
Why'd you move to Texas?
What's that?
Why'd you move to Texas?
Yeah, so my wife's parents had moved back and forth. My father-in-law had been employed both in Houston and in Boston at different points in his life. So they owned property up there and property down here, and they ultimately settled here. And the town where they live is basically at the midpoint between Houston and Galveston. He was working downtown and also teaching at A&M Galveston.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
What year was that, by the way?
08,
08. Okay.
2008. Yeah.
Hey, because we had spoke a little bit before the cast, and you had mentioned moving down to Texas, especially during the economic crisis, and that's when that took place.
Yeah, that's right. So, coming from out of state, didn't really, I had worked in a family business, great, had a degree, great, but, really struggled to find a job. So pivoted, decided to go back to school.
Okay.
And I think we were talking about this earlier. Applied at the University of Houston. Originally started in the PhD program for economics.
Okay.
My wife, by that time, was expecting, so I did a semester in the PhD program. Did fine.
Yeah.
I did well, but quickly I realized or understood that this was going to be more effort and time than I was going to be willing and able to give.
Yeah. Considering what's going on back home.
Yes.
Right.
So I pivoted, transferred to the business school, and ended up getting an MS in finance. While I was doing that, I ended up getting my first professional job in finance, which was an investment analyst at a single family office here in Houston.
Okay. What was the name of that company? Or if you don't want to say it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a family. It's the name of the family. So,
okay.
Yeah, I generally keep that fairly discreet.
Fair enough.
Reported directly to the head of household, self-made, first generation America to the United States in the chemical business.
Right on.
But
wait, real quick. So then this isn't like working for an investment firm or something like that. This is working directly for the family.
Directly for the family. Originally, I did have a boss, so there was like a chief investment officer. They were just in the process of creating the family office. This was new to them.
Got it.
I mean, they were at the level of wealth, kind of approaching $1 billion in net worth at the time.
Got it.
It made sense for them to have internal advisors. But I mean, our investment committee meetings were me, my boss, and the head of the household. I mean, the three of us. So, yeah, that was an interesting experience.
Yeah, I bet.
Learned a lot there, not just in terms of on the investment side, but just people and personalities.
Sure.
And that's a big part of it when you're dealing with any kind of clients professionally. It's personalities, it's backgrounds, and it's picking up on social cues and body language a lot of times. From there, I did a short stint at Morgan Stanley, but that was more of a sales-focused job, so it wasn't a good fit for me.
Okay.
And then I pivoted into the RIA space, the Registered Investment Advisor space. So those are the fee-only type firms in wealth management. So I've worked at a couple of those, kind of boutique firms. The first one had, I don't know, $2.5 or $3 billion under management. and I was a research analyst there.
Okay.
Was there for, I don't know, almost 4.5 years. And then went to a smaller firm, doing similar things in an investment professional role.
When you say like fee based, is that the opposite of, say, like a fiduciary or something? Or?
No, so RIAs are fiduciaries, so they're not broker dealers. They're not selling you anything. There are no commissions. And I'm also a CFA charter holder, so by definition, I'm also a fiduciary. So I can't sell you something because it might be okay for your portfolio, but it may not be optimal.
Right.
But hey, I get a big fat commission, so I'm gonna sell it to you.
Right.
I'm technically not allowed to do that.
Yeah, that goes against your certifications.
The ethics and standards of practice. So
right on.
Yeah, so I worked at the boutique, the smaller firm, and while I was there, one of the clients had retired and then got bored with retirement, and he had been teaching at the University of Houston for a number of years. He had asked me to come in to do some guest speaking,
right? And
I did that a few times and thought, I could do this.
Yeah, you got a knack for it.
So I started teaching, and I've been teaching finance and economics at the University of Houston for the last 3 years.
Cool.
And I left the last boutique wealth management firm on the beginning of 2021.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, I believe, like, you started maybe like right around the time I took your class. Like basically, was that when you started? I started August, right? So it would have been the fall semester. So it would have been August 2020. Okay. I think that's basically around the time that I maybe started taking classes at UH main campus too. Okay. I might not have taken your class that semester, but
I think you took it in the spring of 22.
Spring of 22.
I think it's only been a year.
Yeah. Wow. Time flies.
Yeah, it does. It does. It all kind of gets a blur. So, but by that time you were, I guess, 2 years into teaching at U of H?
Almost. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I teach honors. Economics, honors, finance, and then an investments class as well.
Okay. Do you get, I mean, obviously there's some sort of fulfillment out of doing the teaching versus maybe actually working the, the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, you know? It's definitely a different dynamic. Yeah. I'm pretty, there's a lot of freedom, a lot of leeway with teaching. I mean, there's nobody looking over my shoulder. Not that there was at prior roles necessarily, but there's also no clients.
Yeah. I guess the students are clients technically, but I mean you're doing well.
Right, but they're there to learn, and then that's their role. When you're dealing with a client, they're not necessarily looking to go to school.
Right.
They want to make sure that you're being a good steward of their money, of their wealth.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different dynamic. Yeah. The students are younger. I mean, the last firm I worked for, typical family net worth was probably in the $50 to $100 million range, and so you're in the conference room with people that are, 70 years old, successful entrepreneurs, business owners, right. Former or current corporate executive, like pretty heavy hitting people, and
right.
They're twice your age. It can be pretty intimidating. So
sure.
that is one nice thing about teaching is at this point I'm basically old enough to be the parent of most of my students. most.
Some exceptions.
Yeah. We're the exception for sure.
Yeah, I was definitely the oldest in my class.
Were you? Did you look around? You're like, oh.
Well, I looked around on Zoom because it was all online, but all the faces look pretty young. So.
But that class, the class that you took, that investments class, we do that online. I have done it in person, but that does seem to attract some older students.
Yeah, I imagine so. Investments class, what would y'all cover? I mean, it seems like the title itself would say it. But
yeah, I mean, it's fairly high level. I try to keep it more conceptual, qualitative. I've added a little bit more math to it over the semesters. Probably when you took it, there was effectively no math.
Yeah.
My thinking being, I can have you spend a bunch of time doing tedious calculations to come up with a precise answer, memorize formulas, or I can have you understand broader concepts and relationships that you might actually remember.
Okay.
I approach it a little bit differently. My objective when teaching is for the students to learn.
Sure.
So, like, there's not necessarily a curve. Like, if everyone gets an A in the class, everyone gets an A in the class.
Right.
Like, there's no preset, like, oh, I can only have 25% of the class that gets an A or an A minus. I need 40% of the class that gets B's and C's, and then maybe there's a few people at the bottom that get D's and F's. Like, there's no preconceived notion. Like, it's an absolute benchmark, not a relative one for me. Okay. Like, if you learn the material and you test it and you do the assignments and you complete them correctly and completely,
and then boom, you got it.
Everyone can get a 95 in my class.
I get it.
I mean, they don't, but they could, and that's on them, right? So the objective is to learn. It's not to test to fail.
Got it. I get what you're saying, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's definitely better use of your skills and abilities. I mean, if someone doesn't learn, they don't understand it, then that's kind of on them. But I mean, you teach in a way that's very, just like I said, very, very down to earth, realistic, very easy to digest. I guess I could, it's just very palatable, I guess.
Yeah, sure. I mean, thank you, but that's kind of the point, right? Like, I don't want things to be so tedious or over the top that students lose interest. Mm-hmm. They get discouraged. I have some kind of core principles or tenets when it comes to investing, and one of them is not complicate matters, right? The idea is to take complex ideas or concepts and make them simple, whether that's in the classroom or dealing with a client or in my personal life.
Yeah, kind of like a doctor. I was going to say, most of a doctor's job, other than the actual surgeries or whatever they do, is explaining what's going on in the patient in layman's terms.
Sure.
A lot of them is like taking all the professional jargon and then breaking it down to where Susie can understand it.
But you got to be careful with that, because there is a balance, right? You can't. You have to dumb it down or water it down. Yeah. You have to put it in language that people understand, but you can't lose any of the rigor, because then you lose credibility.
Right? Yeah, you can't do it to a toddler level.
Like, in your example, if I'm talking to a surgeon and he's being too high level or too vague or whatever, then I'm going to lose confidence that he actually knows what he's doing. So there's a little bit, you have to strike a little bit of a balance there.
Right. Well, so investing, the little investing that I do mostly is through 401ks through my employer. Anyways, all of those funds and everything else come with a prospectus, right? And if you've ever just looked over those things, like me, someone who doesn't have any sort of inside knowledge with it, some of it looks pretty daunting, Sure. And there's a lot of it's always in the smallest print you can ever fucking find too. That's but right. You're reading it all and you're trying to figure it out. And so someone like me, when I choose investments, I look at things like the expense ratio, because I want to know how much it's going to cost me, that kind of a thing. And, of course, I look at their average returns and what have you. And as long as they're in the positive somewhere, we're good to go. And then we listen to, the company I work for, Lubrizol, is owned by Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, right? And he Uncle Warren has basically said, "Hey, index funds all the way. If you want to play the long game." So it's like for working class guys like me, when it comes to investing, that's what we're looking at. At least that's what I'm looking at. Yeah. How much is this going to cost me? Am I going to get some pretty decent returns? And let me go ahead and max it out every year, and take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is just focusing on what you can control, so you can control your contribution to that account. Mm-hmm. If that is your only savings vehicle, then I think that maxing that out makes sense.
Right.
If you were disciplined enough or believe that you were disciplined enough to hold yourself accountable, I would say, contribute up to the level needed to max out the match.
Right. Yeah.
And then save elsewhere. But there's definitely some intangible benefits to just maxing it out. You can't touch the money until you're older. Mm-hmm. So leave it alone.
Right.
In terms of, I think making sure expenses are reasonable. And then not just looking at performance, but understanding how is the performance compared to what it's supposed to be. Is that investment, is that manager, if it's an active fund, are they doing what they said they were going to do?
Right.
If it's a large cap growth manager and it's actively managed, meaning that they're they're trading.
Yeah.
If you were to plot it, is it actually a large cap growth manager, or did they drift into mid cap? Did they drift into value stocks?
And what would define that? Would it be their returns, the percentage of the returns?
Not necessarily. You'd have to look at the holdings.
Okay.
So what happens is some active managers will chase performance if they've not been doing well, and they will drift into other styles to play catch up.
Got it.
Or try to anyway.
Right.
And that's probably one of the biggest reasons why active managers get fired, because they don't do what they say they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you're in an area of the market that's down 10% and you're down 10%, fine. That's what you were hired to do. Like, that makes sense. You're in alignment with what your segment of the market did. If the market's down, if your area of the market's down 10% and you're up 10%, you've obviously done something different.
Right.
Which could be good, but we want to know what that is.
What that was, yeah.
And if doing something different meant instead of being a large cap growth manager, you became a small cap value manager, you're probably fired.
Really? Even though you made positive returns on the portfolio?
Because it means that the process is broken, that the controls are broken, and that it's unlikely to be repeatable.
Oh, okay, got it.
And when we're talking about investing, you're talking about contributing to a 401k, grinding it out at work and making your contributions and hopefully building something over time. The key to that is compounding returns.
Right.
The key to compounding returns is staying invested.
Yeah.
Over a long and doing it over a long period of time, being repeated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having a repeatable process that compounds those returns.
Got it. So so active manager does something like that. Maybe not saying that it's anything ethically wrong, but he just veered from the boundaries.
Yes.
And then, okay, well, if you did that just for that one little moment and then went back to what you were supposed to do.
Yeah, but you can't time the market like that, because the opposite can happen just as easily, right?
Yeah, you can go. Yeah, a lot of active managers get whipsawed.
What's that?
Right, like exactly what you're saying. Like you try to chase this thing, you get blown up over here. You try to go back, you get blown up. You lose in all directions because you're chasing.
So you should just stay within your boundaries, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. And if it's just down in that area of the market, it's just down. It is what it is.
Yeah, it won't be down forever.
Exactly, because we know these things do this.
Well, because one of the keys to staying invested is to manage risk, and one of the most effective ways of managing risk for most people is diversification.
Right.
Well, by definition, to be diversified, that means that your assets aren't all moving in the same direction at the same time, which means that when some things are doing well, some things must be doing poorly, and vice versa.
Sure.
So if the market's going straight up and everything you own is going straight up, you're not very well diversified.
Okay, got you. Because once the bottom falls out, watch out.
Then they're all gonna fall. Yeah. Now, I mean, and I say it in some of the classes, those metrics in terms of correlation across assets is not a stable number, right? So statistics are not stable, meaning you could have two assets in your portfolio and say, I'm pretty well diversified because they have a low correlation. Well, that might be true today.
Okay.
But 3 months from now, that correlation can change, right? Generally during times of distress in the market. So if you turn on CNBC during a financial crisis or downturn, you'll hear the talking heads say, correlations are going to 1, meaning everything is being sold.
Oh, okay.
It's all going down. Stocks, bonds, commodity, it's all going. There's no place to hide.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. Probably what happened during COVID and everything. Everything just.
Well, yeah, because I think that was a hard stop to the economy.
Everything shut down, yeah.
In was that similar to 2008? I mean, because 2008, I'm new to the workforce, for the most part. Have a consistent job at another chemical plant company around that time, and I mean, it seemed like everything just stopped at the same time too. I mean, we know it was the real estate market bubble that busted, but it seemed to have obviously affected everything. Because I remember at my company, we weren't doing hardly any, and at the time I worked at like a chemical transfer company, and we weren't even hardly moving any chemicals around.
Sure.
Just moving them from truck to rail car to tank to barge, stuff like that. Those movements all seemed to stop. It was as if even the chemical plant companies were like, "Hey, we need to sit here for a second and not make any moves."
Sure, there could have been a lot of reasons for that. I mean, general economic slowdown during the financial crisis, but there were funding issues, right? So like money market funds were were in duress as well.
Okay.
Meaning, there were funds that broke the buck, meaning their net asset value dropped below $1. It's supposed to be $1. So if you have cash in the bank,
right,
you have $100.
Yes.
It's worth $100. What if you went to the bank and they said it's worth it's worth $95? Right. For the same money, right? So it broke down certain areas of finance, of financial markets and capital markets, but in particular money markets. So in your case, I mean, I don't know, but there could have been a possibility where they needed to slow down because a lot of companies depend on what's called commercial paper, which is short-term lending, to make payroll. They all do it because it's efficient. But if that market seizes, they can't make payroll. They're not moving product. They're turning the lights off.
Yeah.
And that was where we were headed probably during the financial crisis. There were bailouts, which in retrospect ended up being tiny compared to what we've done in response to COVID.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. What's the relation between the two? Because I feel like those were two very monumental moments in our economy. It was 2008, then there was maybe a few other cyclical things that naturally happened between then. But then 2020,
Yeah, I mean, there's a pandemic, and we had lockdowns to try to manage the spread of a disease.
Right.
When you shut off the economy, it stops. Everything stops. So our GDP would have taken, a 20% hit. It would have been a catastrophic loss. So what we did was, or not, as a nation, what we did was we leaned on fiscal and monetary policy to fill in that hole. Right? Overnight, 1 week, 6.7 or 6.9 million people filed for unemployment. Within a month, there were 20 million extra people unemployed. Like that's meaningful. Like the response to that was appropriate. Let's just get money in everyone's hands as fast as possible. Let's stop the bleeding. Let's backfill this gap in our economy, and we'll deal with the consequences later, which is what we've been doing for the last year and a half.
That's what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And people have short memory, so
yeah.
Yep.
Well, you ain't lying.
I can tell you, spending too much in COVID response money is the right mistake to make.
Right.
Because the opposite is devastating. So during the 1930s, the opposite happened, right? During the Depression, we didn't spend any money, and people went hungry for a decade. Not good. Yeah. So we avoided that. If we hadn't done anything, the COVID response and the economic lockdowns had the potential to be worse than the onset of the Depression.
The Great Depression.
Yeah.
What's funny is wasn't out of the Great Depression the Social Security benefits and things like welfare. It wasn't that born out of that.
A lot of social programs.
Yeah, social programs. There you go.
Yeah, a lot of social safety net. Social Security.
Right.
A lot of things that are still in existence today. And are used
so
today.
It's almost like when we face those financial crises now, we can't go back to what we would have done in the 1930s because all that's in place.
Well, we got some safety nets.
We have some safety nets, but the system is more fragile than I think people realize. I mean, we live in a country where the majority of people live hand to mouth, meaning paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
So you lose your job overnight because there's a COVID shutdown or lockdown.
Right.
Check doesn't come this week.
Yeah.
You can blow off the credit card company, you can blow off your landlord, car payment, whatever. You can't blow off the grocery store, right? You need to eat.
Yeah.
So, getting money into people's hands as quickly as possible was the objective. But what what was realized was some of our infrastructure was sad in terms of doing that. There were states that their unemployment offices needed to hire consultants because the operating software was 40 years old.
Oh,
well,
man.
they struggled to find consultants because those people are either dead or retired. The people that actually built those systems.
Those 40-year-old programs, they probably should have upgraded.
Right, you bring in a 30-year-old program, and he's like, I don't know what this is.
Right.
MS
DOS.
Yeah, that's what I said.
The Matrix.
I
Is
mean,
this MS-DOS? Yeah, I got you. I
yes.
got you.
Yeah.
I mean, the answer to that question, I think, was yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, there were a lot of vulnerabilities. Obviously, then we realized that there were a lot of vulnerabilities in supply chains.
Oh yeah, that was huge.
And that persisted, and that contributed to inflation. But I would take a peak 9% inflation over the opposite,
Which was 1930s.
Yeah.
Everyone's going hungry, food lines, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean,
And then add a dust bowl to it.
Yeah, right. That was
insult. Yeah, that was insult to injury.
Kicking when you're down. Yeah.
Salt in the wound.
No, absolutely. But people have short memories. People don't remember, the early days. I mean, it was only 3 years ago, and people forgot.
Right.
Whether it was wearing a mask or shutting businesses, you do stuff like that because you don't know, and we're trying to figure it out.
Right. Well, and then all the conspiracies leach into, right? They designed this. They did this on purpose for.
I don't know who they is.
Yeah,
but
I know, right? Yeah.
who these pronoun people are, but
yeah.
Yeah, so the response was, I guess a little heavy-handed, as it turns out. Was there fraud? Of course, a lot of it.
Oh yeah, businesses taking out loans, PPE loans.
Oh, the
Yeah,
PPP?
the PPP loan,
yeah.
of course.
PPP, yeah.
Fine.
That's shameful. I'll say.
Fine, but if people lose track of the numbers, right?
Yeah.
People are ripping off all government programs all the time.
Yeah.
Right. That was just one more. That it was a little bit more acute of a situation.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, there's people that are ripping off Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid right now. Do they get caught? Is it worth catching them? I mean, probably. But you're distributing cash to 30 million people. If there's 100,000 people that are on the edge about maybe they're fraudulent or immoral or something,
Right.
is it worth hiring 50,000 government employees to go police the 100,000? It doesn't make any sense. So
So they'll just chalk it up.
sometimes,
Yeah. They'll say, hey, it's part of the game, unless it gets too big, obviously. Because
Yeah,
there has been people in the news, even in the Houston area, that have gotten down, taken down for the fraudulent PPP loans.
Yeah, I mean,
but that's
so
because
it
it
was
was in the tens of millions.
yeah, it was egregious, right? I mean,
Right.
there was I saw a story. There was a guy in Miami, and he ran like a landscaping business, or a couple of them. Which, okay, so he mowed lawns,
yeah.
for a living, and right, with a crew, and that's fine. But he ended up taking like 3 different loans. I think it was on the order of about $10 million.
Oh yeah.
But then he wasn't smart about it, right? Then he's splashing it around town. He buys 2 Lamborghinis. He's doing all this stuff on social media, on Instagram, showing his new girlfriends and cars and living that life. And yeah, he got caught.
Yeah.
And did he even pay his employees? Like, did he spread it out at all, or just keep it all himself?
Who knows, man? Who knows?
Probably to himself. People do tend to be selfish. So.
Right. But more to his point, like he said, at least what I gathered what you said was, hey man, this was the right mistake to make. We had to do this to get people, I guess, money back in their pockets so they can start maybe stimulating the economy again.
Yes.
Part of that video that Cody and I watched a little bit that you have your class watch or recommend that they watch, talks about that. Like, that's how, we have to do this. We have to spend, we have to
My
buy things.
my spending is your income.
Yeah, exactly. And so we have to do this in order for our economy to work,
Yeah, and people, being hyperbolic or extreme in terms of, oh, look at this, runaway inflation. That's not what has happened here. It peaked at 9. You look up the inflation rates in Venezuela, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Or Argentina at different points in time, or Zimbabwe at different points in time, or the Weimar Republic in Germany.
I was going to say, that comes to mind. Because it was like wheelbarrows of cash to buy like a loaf of bread. I seem to remember.
Yeah, I think the textbook definition of hyperinflation is like 50% a month compounded or 1,000% a year, and we're talking about peak at 9, which
so,
I know it puts the screws to some people,
right.
but it is, that it peaked, it's come down. Last print was 4%. Not anything to get too concerned about, especially considering what the counterfactual could have been, what could have happened.
So how do you get the public to understand something like that? Because I go to work and I talk to guys and boy, they're ready to it's Biden, it's all Biden, or let's say Trump was doing. Actually, Trump was handling some of this in the beginning.
Well, about
it's
short-term memory,
it's everybody.
It happened during that presidency. He did the first rounds of
the stimulus,
right. But then all of a sudden, it fed over to the next presidency.
Of course,
and
it always does.
Whoever's at that time, it's their fault. It's their fault. It's like it's not their fault. It's our. It's everyone's.
It's everyone's fault and everyone's problem to deal with.
Exactly. Right, exactly. So collectively,
it's a collective
and that's
fault.
what I'm trying to say. Like, how do you get people to understand this? Like,
Right.
where do you get that information? You just said it peaked at 9. The next printout was what you said 4.
Well, no. I mean, it peaked at 9, but the most recent one for May was 4.
Yeah.
And the month before that was 4.9, and the month before that had a 5 handle or whatever, right? So it's been coming down.
I guess what I'm saying is
that's public information.
Well, I was gonna say I know it should be, but I feel like the mainstream media, and I know I put that in quotations because that's been the headline now, right? Doesn't seem to say that, or maybe it does, and people aren't realizing it. I don't know because it's not sensational.
Probably a combination of both. There's a lot of things that people argue about that are what I describe as open, objective, and observable, meaning there are actual facts. You can disagree with them or not believe them or whatever, but there is an official inflation rate. We have a money supply. You can go to a website right now that I use frequently and see what the money supply is.
What website is that?
Fred.
Fred?
Yes, it's the St. Louis Federal Reserve.
It's Fred.com?
I think it's either Fred. It's probably Fred Gov, but
.gov.
But just put St. Louis Fed Fred.
Okay, let's see what we're gonna get
And they're a big resource for
looking it up now.
Oh, there you go. Ooh. Did you spell Fred correctly?
Yeah, no, it looked like he spelled freed.
Yeah,
take the A away.
And what is AT&T search? I'm curious. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, I know, right? Fred.gov, you said. That's interesting. That's what I'm saying. So this website that you frequent or use a lot has what kind of information?
Yeah, there you go. St. Louis Fed. So right there, even on their landing page, you can press one of those buttons. So in the middle of those bubbles, there's one called M2, and that is our money supply.
Do the M2, Bubba. You see it?
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Right, and that's going to show you, and then click the top one to the right, where it says M2.
M2 highlighted blue.
Yep. Okay, so that is the money supply in the United States.
Okay.
So that's coins, cash, deposits, like basically everything. There's M1. I mean, there's other measures.
Is this everything that's been minted?
Plus things that don't physically exist.
Okay.
But you can see, like if you clicked, the 5-year number, right? So if you just scroll the cursor up and hit 5 years.
Okay.
Just to zoom in. So that gray vertical bar is the pandemic.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
So what we did there is we printed a lot of money and we distributed a lot of money. So you can see that we were on a trend and we basically added, I don't know, $7 or $8 trillion to our money supply. And what you can also see is over the last, 6 months plus, our money supply has been shrinking. So we're taking that money back.
Oh, that's coming down right here.
Yep. So
there.
and actually in recent months it's been coming down and you can manipulate the data. It's a really intuitive website, but
Sure.
It's crashed. The year-over-year rate of change is the lowest or the biggest negative number it's ever been on record. So we're taking cash back out. But this is what drives inflation. Supply chain issues drive inflation. politics do not drive inflation. Who sits in the White House in general doesn't cause inflation.
Right.
The closest that we came to that recently was actually Trump with the tariffs on Chinese imports.
Oh, right. I remember that.
All you're doing there is taxing a good that, depending on what kind of good it is, that's going to get passed along to consumers. You're just making something more expensive.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Because I don't know how much, I don't want to throw a percentage out there, but just about everything you look at is made in China.
Yeah.
So, if the company is like, oh, okay, we have to pay a tariff on this, no problem. We'll just mark it up in the damn marketplace at the shop.
Still cheaper than making it here.
Yeah, exactly. That's crazy. And that's kind of sad too, though, because so how do you feel about that? Like, should more manufacturing be done here? You know, I mean, we just need to pay more.
We're at the early innings or early stages of what will hopefully, or in some ways, become a bit of a mega trend on that. This idea of reshoring or onshoring, meaning instead of, either moving manufacturing capabilities out of China or wherever and putting it in the United States or Canada or Mexico, that's close enough, and that would be nearshoring, right? So, okay, we were going to build something in China, but maybe we build it in Mexico, or maybe we build it somewhere in the United States. So those two things, right? Bringing it back and then creating new manufacturing here. I think these are choices, right? So if you think about, how things were done 70 years ago, or, pick a number.
Sure.
In terms of manufacturing, whether that's clothing or other consumer goods, a lot of it was made in the United States.
Right.
As a result of that, there were jobs for uneducated people, or people without college education or formal education that could make a living.
Yeah.
So the product was more expensive, but there were more people that could afford it, right? It's kind of circular.
Yeah.
With some things, quality gets better. Some things, quality gets worse. I think about clothing. I think about shoes. My grandfather never wore synthetic shoes, like dress shoes. Like, he didn't go buy a pair of black shoes at Aldo or whatever that's made out of some oil-based petroleum, plastic fake shoe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
His shoes were made out of leather.
Genuine leather.
Right? But now, if you want a pair of actual leather shoes, that's a luxury item.
Oh, it is. Yeah. No
right? And it costs, $400 or $500. Yep. Is that what shoes should cost?
No,
I don't think so.
No.
Well, what if your buddy down the street worked at the shoe plant and made $150,000 a year cobbling shoes together?
So, I mean,
well, then in that case, you would pay it. I guess, right?
He deserves that money for
Well,
because that's what he's doing. He's making a living.
Right. What he's making is a higher quality or higher price item.
Right.
Here. That's all we've done. We've just shipped it somewhere else. And I think there's collective questions about, questions that we need to ask ourselves about what you want, what is right.
Yeah.
Right? There are decisions, and maybe we'll face some of those decisions again. The artificial intelligence stuff has been is all over the news, and there's actual questions there. Like, what do you want it to do? Right? The idea that it's going to replace a lot of people. Yeah, technology generally kills jobs, creates new ones, and enhances some existing jobs. That's what technology does.
Right.
And this is just another form of technology.
With AI, yeah.
But if you really think that you can embed it into machines and replace all of us, is that something you want to do?
No, because then there you go. Right. Who's left?
Who's left?
Who's left? And what people are left are slowly dying or starving, and then that's going to lead to some other social issues, probably like crime and everything else. You know what I mean?
Definitely social issues.
Yeah, that's just putting it lightly, I suppose.
But to get back to your other question, if the information is out there, why don't people know? Why are the guys at work arguing and pointing fingers at Trump or Biden or whatever?
Yeah,
because they don't know any better.
Right.
And I can show them the Fred website all day long, and they don't care.
No, they won't. It's fake news. Fake news.
And I think that's where education can play a role, but in certain extreme areas,
it's lost.
Yeah, that's lost forever.
Yeah, well, not the bottom, but what you were saying, in other extreme areas too, that will be lost on them.
Yeah, I mean, there are people that just don't want to believe reality.
Yeah.
Because everything is a conspiracy, and that's fine. And those people, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on who you are, have a platform, have a voice more louder than any time in human history. Right?
Yeah.
Anyone can start a YouTube channel.
Sure.
Anyone can be on Twitter.
Yeah.
And gather a following.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
And the more extreme you are, the more people listen.
In some respects, and even though what we're doing here is very humble, like I explained before, we are trying to do our best and be as authentic as we can be and try to put good information out there. Which is why having someone like you on the cast right now is like, I'm very appreciative of that, because again, that information's out there. I don't feel like I didn't know about this Fred.gov, but you best believe I'm about to bookmark it. It's gonna be my favorites. Like I want to look at.
It's not just inflation information.
Yeah.
It's the components of inflation. It's money supply. It's rentals. It's unbelievably deep and wide in terms of available economic information.
Right.
That goes back in some cases 50, 60 years plus. Nobody's lying to you.
Right.
It's right there. Or if people are lying to you, you can make a decision whether or not it's directionally correct.
Sure.
Okay, I say that inflation peaked at 9%. You tell me it was 20. Fine. It's still lower. It's still been cut in half, right? Or are you going to argue that it just moves however it needs to move to support whatever narrative you're trying to spin?
Right. Whatever they are controlling.
Yes.
I mean, it is. I can see where people's conspiracy theories can start to formulate. One of the first times that it was early 2000 and it might have been 7 or 8. When did we see that Loose Change documentary? Do you remember that Loose Change documentary? Yeah. And the Zeitgeist. Did you happen to see any of those, by the way?
Were we in high school?
Loose
Change was one, and then Zeitgeist was the other. And
it was all 9/11 conspiracy.
It was basically exactly that. It was very compelling, And then some of it talked about like the way the financial markets were designed and how on Jekyll Island, all the major heads of banks, and we're talking about like the who's the J.P. Morgan Chase and everybody else. They formed the Federal Reserve Act and made old buddy sign it. Was it Woodrow Wilson or whoever the hell did it? I don't know.
Sure.
One of those presidents.
All right.
Anyways, but then that starts the grand conspiracy of
course.
Okay, well, you have these big banking giants, manipulating markets and what have you, to their own end, so that the rich get richer and what have you, Right.
Yeah, I think fortunately or unfortunately, again, getting back to your question, how do you get people to know better?
Yeah,
you can't. So sometimes you're lied. I mean, you should be lied to.
Yeah.
I mean, right? I'm a parent. Like sometimes, I don't want to tell my kid something that's not true, but
no, yeah.
If it's time for bed and I have to make something up for that to convince them,
right,
then I'm going to do it.
And so be it.
Because it's in their best interest. Now, I know that as a parent, and people as adults don't appreciate living in a nanny state or whatever. But the average person has no idea, that doesn't really know much about economics or finance. And it's a lot easier to attach yourself to a conspiracy theory that requires no research or rigor or critical thinking.
Right.
It's emotional. It's emotion driven.
I would even argue though too that if our government was truly transparent to its constituents, like you ever see a president when they become the president, right? They're usually and maybe not now because our past two presidents have been like in their 80s or whatever. But but like look at President Barack Obama. When he came in, he had a full head of hair. It was black. It was awesome. Like you look at the dude, but like within like the first 6 months, he was like gray.
Right.
And I think it's because they briefed him and they're like, "Hey, Mr. President, here's what's really going down."
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Here's the shit that's happening.
We have aliens in the basement.
It could be aliens. It could be whatever. It could be like the brink of human society. Like the destruction of it is like this close. The doomsday clock that we print out. Like it's as real as it can get, and that can do something to somebody. Is what I'm trying to say. And if that knowledge was as transparent to everybody, it would be freaking mass pandemonium.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're right. Maybe the government does have almost like a parental obligation to try to, hey man, Hush,
But,
little baby.
yeah, sure, but that's a difficult balance.
Yeah.
That's a difficult balance to strike because, if that comes out and if there were truth or substance to that and people find out, then they're going to be upset.
Sure.
That their government is lying to them.
Lied to them. Yeah.
And the intentions may have been good, but
for your own good, right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
But that's never how it's going to be perceived.
Of course not.
Right? I mean, and at this point, some of the conspiracies and just the narrative is
ridiculous.
Yeah,
I agree. Some of it's pretty ridiculous. But if you've never saw Loose Change or if you ever watched Zeitgeist, they do it. I mean,
the Loose Change sounds familiar.
Cool.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I'm a big documentary person. It's been a while, but
it's actually like he just threw it back up on Wikipedia. Loose Change 9/11. I think they kind of went in. Zeitgeist really went into the financial markets a little bit more and try to delve into that conspiracy a little bit. But I mean, hey, it is what it is. This is the game that has been designed for us, for better, for worse.
Sure.
This is what we have. So why not use, again, like any game, take baseball, you know what I'm saying? You know the rules, you know how to play, you have the ability to win.
Right.
So let's do that. We can rant and rave all day at the creators of it, you know what I mean? But this is what we have to maintain with. So let's
play the game.
Let's play the game and play it to the best of our advantage. And I think that's what's good about having, people who are learned in the finance and in the markets, and whether or not you choose to do that as a profession or you need to supplement some of your education, because you're just a working class man and you need to just get a little bit more learned on it.
Well, I think, unfortunately, I don't know how many people, what percentage of the adult population has that innate curiosity, that desire to learn, right? To start, your podcast here. Like, you don't have to do this. It's a lot easier to just sit on your couch and drink beer and watch Netflix all day.
Oh, it is. Yeah, no doubt.
Right. So, like doing this is a challenge, and it speaks to whatever it is that's driving you in terms of enlightenment or learning or curiosity or whatever it is. Well, most people don't. They just don't care. They'll eat whatever is served in front of them and don't think about it. A lot of people are on autopilot.
Yeah.
And there is no intellectual curiosity. Critical thinking is hard.
Yeah. I guess that's why they call it critical thinking.
Well, it's critical because it's important, but if it takes time and attention, I mean, we the attention span of most people is so short.
Right. We can lose it.
You can't. You got to have the right colors in your backdrop if you're on the news. Whether you're on Fox or CNN or MSNBC or any of the, like all those sets are designed to
appear, ship or drop. Right.
Yeah, those sets are designed to elicit a certain reaction, and generally an emotional one.
And that's probably why they don't really try to give you the true numbers, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I think
because it's not sensationalized.
I think I doubt you want to turn this into a political show.
I'm not opposed to some political conversations.
But, kind of getting back to the idea, that certain things are open and are observable and objective.
Yeah.
I mean, this is very anecdotal. Take it for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm flipping through the channels. This was, I don't know, last year or something.
Okay.
It was when I think inflation was higher. Maybe it was even before then. I don't know. Biden was definitely president. I'm flipping through the channels, and I come to Fox News, and Tucker Carlson is on.
Yeah,
and he's talking about they're showing B-roll from like stores where shelves are empty, and he says on national television hashtag empty shelves Biden is trending. It's been #1 trending today on Twitter.
This is literal what he says.
It's the 7 p.m. Central Time show. So this is it. It's not a repeat.
Oh Lord!
I take my phone out. I open my Twitter. I don't see it. I go to global trending. Don't see it. Go to U.S. trending. Don't see it. Search the hashtag. Yeah. Can't find anything.
Right.
He is just on national television making shit up.
Yeah.
And the reason why he's on television making shit up because it gets his viewers angry.
Right.
And he knows that his viewers, their ages start with a 6 and above.
Yeah.
They don't have Twitter.
Oh yeah. There you go.
It was so blatant. I'm sitting there, I'm searching for, empty shells Biden or whatever it was. It was to that effect. And they're showing B-roll and he's ranting and raving, telling you how angry you should be. Right. See, that's the key with Fox News in particular. And we won't go too far down the rabbit hole here. When you listen to it, it's telling you how to feel, not what happened.
Right.
It's telling you this is wrong. You should be angry. You should be scared. This is bad.
Right.
It doesn't tell you 5 people are missing today because they're in some submersible that sank, 12,000 feet next to the Titanic.
Yeah, that was wild, by the way.
Right? They would find some narrative to connect that back to the Biden administration.
Biden did this.
Right. Yeah. Like there would be some jab there. Which doesn't even make any sense. But if you're not thinking, if you're on autopilot, the guy that's yelling on the screen makes sense because he's pressing the right buttons. He's pressing the right emotional buttons. What he says is in alignment logically. It could be right.
Right.
But it's not.
But speaking of empty shelves, I don't seem to remember there being too many empty shelves. I mean, there was a couple of times when my wife and I went to the grocery store. Maybe this is just where we live. I don't know. But we went to the grocery store, and maybe we couldn't find the ribeye steaks we wanted. But there was still plenty of other...
The toilet paper was gone.
Yeah, there was definitely a toilet paper thing.
This was sometime between... it was very acute. Like at the very onset of the pandemic, there were empty shelves. But that was because people went berserk like they do down here, anticipating a hurricane.
Oh, right.
Same kind of response, which is fine.
Yeah.
It's to be expected.
Yeah. But it was short-lived.
Yes, very.
Yeah.
Sometime between then and when inflation started picking up, I don't know. It was this nonsensical story. And frankly, that's what that station puts on all day, every day.
Right.
And I don't know how people do it. I mean, to be all wound up like that all day, every day.
Bad for your heart.
You would think.
Yeah, it's probably bad. It's probably bad for your
blood pressure.
But just to be fair, does the left side of the political spectrum, do they have an equivalent? Do they have the same kind of agenda to do this? To do the same. CNN.
Well, so if I mean, you can look this up, but I mean, CNN, yes, is slightly left leaning,
right?
But it's not like so. Fox News is all the way to the right.
Yeah, there's no denying that.
There's not really. I mean, MSNBC, I guess, maybe technically is closer to the other left, but it doesn't really exist. And I think part of that is, particularly in the last few years, getting back to the conspiracy theory idea.
Right.
I don't know. It seems like people on one side of the spectrum, on one side of the political spectrum, are more vulnerable to conspiracies. Because I don't see who's the Alex Jones on the left side?
Antifa? Yeah, but they don't have a platform, I suppose.
Right. They're not. It's not a person.
Yeah. Right. It's a group.
So, what's the equivalent?
Yeah.
Who's the liberal Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity?
Mm-hmm.
Who's the opposite of Donald Trump?
On the left side,
or Ron DeSantis?
Right.
I guess they're more of like you said, like groups. Maybe
it could be a group. I know Antifa's. I can see where they're coming from, but at the same time, it's one of those. I don't. And you know what? This is dangerous conversations.
Well,
but
it
really is.
But if you think about
it, really is.
The left side tends to be more group oriented anyway. They're more social, more.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah.
So they wouldn't put one person at the top because that's kind of against their ethics or whatever.
I suppose.
So they would be more of a group effort type of thing.
It's
maybe
possible.
I don't know.
It's possible. I will say this: the extremes on both sides for me is the wrong way to go.
Right.
It really is.
But that's the only way you get any attention.
I know, and that's unfortunate because what we need
because most people don't want that.
Yeah.
They want to be, I guess, not incentivized. What's the word? But you know what I mean. Since just worked up, I suppose. I don't know. I certainly don't. But I feel like it's bad for your heart if we can find some common ground
and happiness.
And I feel like the economy should be the common ground. Matter of fact, there's the old slogan, right? It's the economy, stupid, right? Like that's the thing that both of the political parties should understand. Should both come back there and go, hey, you know what? We can argue all day about all the other little social things and here and there and conspiracy, what have you. But let's be real about it. When there's money in our pockets, when there's food in our bellies, we're a lot happier. You know what I mean? And so let's come together on the one thing we can all agree upon, and that's the economy. You know, and then on the full belly, we can argue about all the other stuff, which is usually what happens in Thanksgiving. But
I do have one question because I just thought about this. So you remember whenever gas prices were through the roof, and everyone put those little stickers?
Oh, Biden did this.
Yeah, Biden did this. Biden did this, or whatever.
Yeah,
I always just thought that was just funny because I don't believe that the president has anything to do with gas prices personally. Just from my knowledge of how gas prices work, which I may not know everything about gas prices. Maybe some people listening will be like, "Oh, that's just ignorant. You don't know what you're talking about." Yeah. But maybe you can enlighten some people on the way the gas prices work or market works or anything like that. Because
obviously the impact of one person is going to be limited.
Right.
Now the president does have some pull in terms of managing the strategic petroleum reserves, which can impact supply at the margin. Right. But that's oil. That's not necessarily gasoline that you put in your car.
Right.
These are public markets.
Right. That's what I was kind of thinking.
Like you can see every trade that happens in crude oil, or gasoline, or nat gas, or heat. Like this is all open and observable. Now, if you choose not to understand that, that's fine. But one geriatric patient that sits in the White House is not pulling all these levers to manipulate. Can policies over a long period of time impact it? Of course. But I'd like to say that, or I'd like to think that American companies are smart enough and clever enough to, navigate whatever legislative hurdles they have to do. They've been doing it forever.
Right.
Are the people at Exxon or Chevron or whatever not gonna quit? Like, no, they're going to figure out how to make, pull product from the ground and make money.
Right. Yeah. And I do notice that it comes in waves every single year. It seems like, when people are driving more during the summertime, prices go up and,
well, that's supply and demand.
I know. It's just supply and demand. But
there's some switching costs too.
Yeah.
Right. So, it's seasonal. So different parts of the country use more or less depending, for heating oil. Like the oil is refined differently.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's going to become gasoline or heating oil or jet fuel or whatever. Right. There's processes for that. That's way beyond anything I understand on the chemistry side. But
it costs different.
There's switching costs. Right. They have to shut down this thing to turn on that thing.
Right. To refine this and turn into that.
Right. So like diesel for the longest time used to be like the cheapest there is, right? But in the mid 90s, the EPA put out like emissions and what have you, because diesel, even though it was cheaper to manufacture,
it's dirtier.
I think because of that, it was very it was dirtier.
Sure.
Yeah.
It pollute more, right? So that you had to add more additives to it for it to burn cleaner. Okay. And so consequently, the cost to manufacture diesel now went up. So then now the cost to buy diesel goes up.
Right, sure.
And unfortunately, a lot of our shit that we have, the stuff that we're wearing on our backs and anything else that you might consume comes through a truck. And the truck, the thing that fuels that truck is a diesel.
Right.
So now the transportation costs have gone up for goods and how things.
And kind of that's why you hear about like DEF being introduced into the freight liners and just to clean their diesel and make it cleaner so it burns out cleaner, and that's a whole big other can of worms with the DEF.
Yeah, no doubt. A lot of people are deleting those, but not the big trucks. The big trucks, if they delete them, that they're in some big trouble. But
by the way, thank you, Mikey J. Mikey J's got a microphone now.
Yes.
That was Mikey J chiming in.
Hey, heck yeah!
Say hi, Mikey J.
Yeah.
What's going on, y'all? You beautiful people.
We don't have a camera on him yet, but we will one day.
We're working on that.
Yeah, we'll work on that. But for sure, no doubt. I mean, all those little added stuff. So, like what you were saying, the switching cost. If it costs more to make too, especially, that's going to contribute. But can't deny OPEC either. you know, the influence that those guys have over there in the Middle East.
Sure.
You know, they definitely will mess with the gas prices.
Yeah, I mean, they're still very influential. I mean, nowhere near what it was in the 1970s.
That's true.
You know, so they're not. You're not going to see gas lines anytime soon.
Yeah, and that's good, and that's because we recognize that. I think we saw there was an issue there in the 70s, 80s. You know, when you had to go by your license plate number, if it was whatever it was, then you're allowed to get gas on certain days. And they were like, dependence on foreign oil, no mas. You know, we need to figure out something else for ourselves, and they have. You know, and that's why I don't see anything with the electric, you know, moving over. And I don't want to go too far into this tangent, but that's why I don't really see too much of a problem with the electric vehicles, because again, any sort of less dependence on anything foreign, you know, whether it be foreign oil or what have you, you know. And I'm talking for somebody that works in the oil and gas industry. You know, I should look at electric vehicles and be like, yeah, you know what I mean.
We were talking about, you know, bringing jobs to America, which, you know, I got, you know, different opinions on, but I mean, Tesla has gigafactories.
They do.
In the United States. One in Austin just got built.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, there's a few others.
There's chemical plant operator jobs because they take the lithium and they're able to process it to make the you know, for them to use it in their lithium ion batteries. They need chemical plant operators to do that.
True.
Go figure.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So there's still a job for me somewhere.
Mikey J, didn't your brother just go work for Tesla?
Yeah, he actually just got started. He's been working there for about 2 weeks now. So he says he likes it. There's a lot of things he shows me. He's trying to get me secretly drawn over there.
There you go.
I'm an electrician over here, and I actually know about that type of stuff.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You know, I actually think he knows a lot of stuff over there, and you know, he'd be a good person to have on here to
for sure.
explain the ins and outs of that crazy factory.
Yeah,
out there.
yeah, that'd be
Shout
nice to talk
out
to
to
him about.
Jonathan.
Yeah, shout out to Jonathan, no doubt. We definitely would like to have him on for sure. But yeah, I mean, just again, as you say, with the technology, you know, it has the ability to cancel some jobs, but then also create others.
Sure.
You know,
No, definitely. Yeah.
no doubt.
Yeah, and I wouldn't worry. I mean, oil and gas isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Right. I mean, like even if the goal is to be 100% renewable, that is going to take a lot of petrochemicals
To do that.
to build that. Whatever
Agreed.
that looks like.
Yeah,
right.
agreed.
The infrastructure. Well, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and zero emissions, I don't think means no pollutants. I just think it means like you cancel out
They're trying
the
to cancel.
pollutants with
Right.
you know, some kind of other beneficial thing.
Right.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Plant a tree.
Plant a tree or something. You know.
You know what else I'd like to speak about? Oh man. Okay, so we were talking a little bit more about, or not maybe a little more, but at one point we were talking a little bit about maybe the money markets and the value of a dollar, and then I got to thinking about this whole BRICS nation. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yeah, BRICS used to be the acronym used, I don't know, 10 years ago. I mean, I think it still stands for, you know, Brazil, Russia,
India,
India, and China. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think what you're talking at the time, that was to talk about, you know, these fast growing economies and emerging markets and, you know, kind of an investment theme.
Okay.
A long term trend. I think what you're talking about is a competing global currency.
Yeah, they're supposedly
Yeah.
coming together as nations and saying, hey, we want to elevate the Chinese yuan and say this will be now the standard in global markets as far as currency goes.
Good luck.
Versus with the United States dollar. Good luck, you say.
Yeah.
Okay, because like again, this is just another thing that sounds like impending doom when you hear this thing.
Not even close.
And I'm curious, how can you say that with that confidence? I'm just wondering.
Well, because the U.S. dollar is still very dominant in terms of the transactions globally.
Okay.
And letting it, paint the scenario where you get your, or not you, but whoever gets their way, and the dollar is replaced by yuan, right?
Right.
What happens then? So keep in mind that China is what kind of government and economy?
Right. Is it communist?
Okay.
Okay.
And it's command and control.
Yeah.
And what happens if your currency is the global currency of choice? How much control over it do you have?
No, you have very little.
So what happens to all of your, I don't know, wealthy people that are already trying to move assets out of China?
Yeah, that's exactly what they're going to do. And they may convert it.
They'll just leave because they can just move if we're in New York and we're transacting in yuan anyway.
We'll just go to New York.
Just go to New York. You have no control. You can easily get your money out of the country. They would lose control, and they don't have that is not their objective. I don't know what the percentages are either, but I mean, it still accounts for a relatively small percentage of global transaction volume. Most of it is still in dollars.
Still in dollars.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's not even close.
Will there ever come a time when the dollar is no longer the global currency?
I mean, maybe. I mean, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, in our lifetime, I don't know.
Yeah. No, and you know,
when it's replaced by cryptocurrency, that is.
Oh boy. well, no. Here's the thing. So, and we definitely need to talk about that too.
Yeah.
But like, I kind of did like a little research into, say, like, okay, the Dutch East India Company, right? Wasn't that like the first like major company to, you know, first off even
to blow up?
well, yeah, I'm talking like in the 1700s or whatever the hell that time was.
Yeah.
You know, don't quote me on the dates, right? But at any rate, they were considered like the global economic currency. You know what I mean? And of course, you know, throughout history, there's been different things. I'm sure at one point maybe the British pound was, you know, I don't know, whatever.
Definitely.
Whatever seems to be the most dominating, you know, country out there. So it would stand to, you would think, if you look at all the historical trends, you would stand to think that at some point, like we just said, the U.S. dollar may not be the standard for, you know.
Would that mean that the United States like falls out of power?
At some point, maybe it'll fall out, and just like the British were no longer the top dog. I mean, it doesn't mean they just squandered away somewhere and now they're living in as a third world country. You know, that's not the case. But you know, if we're not the top dog, I also don't think that's not the freaking worst thing in the world. You know, either. I think we'll still have a sustainable economy within ourselves and within our own, you know, continental U.S. where we can, you know, maintain our society. You know,
that's not the American way. American way is to be number one.
Yeah, no, you want to be number one, right? Because you trust yourself more than you trust your friends, and you trust yourself more than you trust your enemies. Right. So
yeah,
if you have the resources to be number one, be number one.
Be number one.
But I think, you know, an idea, and you know, I may have seen it somewhere else recently. You know, it doesn't. You know, like our government is disorganized, and you know, our media is nonsensical reporting on it, and all these problems going on. But the most powerful players right now are U.S. companies.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, are you going to transact in anything other than dollars when half the things you buy come from Apple?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or Google, or Alphabet, or Microsoft?
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola? I mean, Coca-Cola is a global brand anyway. I mean, you can transact, and they do have some foreign exchange exposure, which sometimes helps, sometimes hurts their profitability. But you know, it's these mega cap and these just mega cap tech companies that are going to fill some of these gaps. Like, who cares what our government's doing? We're all on our phones. We're all connected via services provided through goods and services provided by these huge companies, and guess what? Most of those companies are U.S. based.
Except for TikTok.
Sure. I mean,
that's
okay.
That's the only one that I can think of off the top of my head.
I don't know, like Baidu, Alibaba. I mean, these are other large. I think they're. I don't know exactly what they do, but. Pretty widespread in terms of services. The WeChat? In China. Anyway,
I couldn't help but think you were maybe trying to broach on like another conspiracy there. The whole China conspiracy with TikTok.
There's the conspiracy that they're trying to corrupt our youth and just like cripple our economy.
I mean,
by making us all stupider.
Yeah,
it seems like a pretty easy challenge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, are they doing it with some ill intent, or is it it's there at the buffet table and we're over-serving ourselves? Right? Like, who do we blame, right? I mean,
exactly.
Do you need the 12 wings? I don't know.
That's their business model. That's just it. That's what it is.
Yeah, but you could argue, in terms of Nope.
Nope,
Are we
you're
good?
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think I lost my train of thought there.
Oh,
anyway.
did I distract you?
Yeah.
No.
That's okay.
Are we over serving ourselves at the buffet table?
Yeah.
Probably. We're just I mean, at least not me personally, but I mean I know a lot of people are on TikTok just scrolling away, doom scrolling. I think they call
The
it.
doom scrolling. That's horrible, by the way.
Sure, and they're collecting data like any other company.
You're right.
You know
To sell you shit.
what is done with that is
That's the conspiracy. That's where the conspiracy lies, by the way.
What do
That's
they
where the
do
gray
with that? I
area.
mean, except for just feed you more of what you like.
Yeah.
Like, just kind of keep you occupied. Just-
well, because it doesn't just feed
then-
you what you like, and I'm not speaking strictly about TikTok, but just social media platforms in general. They don't just feed you what you like; they feed you things that are tangent to things that you like. Meaning, and there's starting to be a fair amount of studying on this, like particularly around the last two U.S. presidential elections and the influence of bots or hackers in Russia, right? So you're a conservative. You've always been a conservative. You go to church. You're married. You do all the conservative things that conservative people do. You're an NRA guy, and that's pretty good. That's pretty normal stuff. But then you're scrolling, and there's something that's just like on the edge. Maybe it's a little bit more conspiracy theory related, but there's enough overlap where you're like, And now you've been, now they're presenting that to you, and you're like, that's kind of interesting. I'll go down that rabbit hole, or I'll follow or join this Facebook group.
Yeah.
And then it snowballs, right? And
Right.
now you're following something. Now you're not just some, clay shooting NRA guy. Now you're at a protest.
Yeah.
On January 6th.
Or whenever.
2000
or whatever, or the ones orchestrated a couple of years ago in Houston, right? Like both sides. There was a protest and a counter protest in front of a mosque in downtown Houston, organized by nobody there.
Yeah.
Really?
It's not that hard.
Really?
Yeah.
They just showed up? People just showed up?
No, it was
Facebook
organized,
group.
but through like Facebook, but
But that's what I mean. The organizers, so to speak,
weren't
so people just showed up and were like, okay, we're here. We kind of know what to do now. We have our signs.
I don't know why people protest, and I don't know what it does. But
Yeah, don't know.
Other than invite problems and injury normally, but
Cody, you occupied.
I occupied in 08. Yep. Went to New York, Wall Street. And
You didn't go to New York Wall Street.
I did.
You went to no, you didn't. You went to downtown City Hall.
Well, I did that too, but when I was in New York, I also went up to Wall Street and
In
joined
08?
the Occupy.
In 08?
Not 08, but it was shortly after. Like 2011.
I did not know that.
2010.
They were still occupied.
you were protesting Wall Street.
Yeah.
He was just occupying.
I was. How
Was there like a Shake Shack nearby?
That's what I said too, man. I laughed. I was just teasing you.
What are we protesting? It's like we didn't even know.
I was just teasing you.
It was just a movement. We were just happy to be part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I
Young
mean, I
and
think,
naive,
Yeah.
I mean, there's something to be said for that, right? That does pull a lot of people in, just being part of something.
Exactly.
Some camaraderie.
Yep. Some set of ideas you think you share. You don't even know what you believe in yet, and you're just like, kind of, it kind of overlaps with some of my values.
Yeah, it
like,
overlaps, right?
Yeah.
And then you get pulled in, and then
Exactly.
the next thing further to the right or more extreme overlaps a little bit, and next thing you know, you're a QAnon person.
Sucked right in.
Manchurian candidate.
You're a QAnon person, and you're showing up on January 6th.
Yeah.
If how little that takes to nudge people over the edge,
Yeah.
I think is scary.
It is.
It's
It
that
is
mob
scary.
mentality.
Oh, no doubt.
See someone start, acting crazy, you want to join in.
Ugh. Yeah, and it gets dangerous then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of why I was saying that, like if everyone can just realize that, the more money that's in our pockets, right? Or I say the more, but you know what I mean? At least as much as you need to survive comfortably. You know what I mean? That's got to be something we can all agree on. And we got to make the right choices and decisions to get there. And times being what they are, things that will influence pandemic or market bubble or whatever the case may be is going to elicit a response from the overseers, right? our government and everything else to try to do what's supposed to be right, to correct it. But I feel like there's got to be some basic fundamentals that as the individual and as head of households, Cody, you and I, you know what I mean, along with our wives, you know, who
The real
make
bosses.
Yeah. I had to throw that in there, dude. I had to make sure that, anyways, whatever. The heads of households, man and woman, husband and wife, or whatever the case, the dynamic is, and that economic households have got to have some fundamentals to be able to weather their families through this stuff, is what I'm trying to get at.
Right.
You know, and I can't help but wonder, Craig, if in your classes, that's got to be like an underlying thought, you know what I mean? Or like the you know,
takeaway or something.
Yeah, at the background of every class has got to be like, hey, you know, if everyone can know how to weather these cycles and market downturns together, you know, then we'll have a better society. Kind of like what we were talking about even again before the cast. You know, I have a very a committed. I'm losing my train of thought, but the thing is, I want to make sure my children succeed. You know what I mean? I love Cody's children. You know what I mean? And I would do anything for them. You know, but you know, he's going to have to take care of his children. He's going to have to make sure that they're okay. You know what I'm saying? And so the point being that, you know, what can I do? I guess, okay, I'm rambling now. I apologize.
But your children are your responsibility.
There it is.
You want to make sure you provide for them.
Thank you. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Now, you are my children's godfather, so if something happened to me,
yeah,
they'd be on you.
And I got them. Your problem. And I got them. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I can't say that I don't care about your children,
right? You
know, or anyone else's children. Let's say it's not you. Let's say it's somebody else's that's a complete stranger,
right?
Okay, because I want them to do well too, because they're going to be inhabiting the same, you know, society.
In theory, you care about everybody.
Yeah, I want everyone to do well, so that we have a good enough environment for my children to thrive.
Good economy when they're adults and making decisions and buying houses, and hopefully they can afford a house. You know, because our parents definitely had no issue, it seems, but our generation seems to be a little screwed on that end.
It can be a little tougher, I suppose. But the point being this, like being able to spread this knowledge and try to get the good habits into everybody's hands. It shouldn't be some sort of like best kept secret. It needs to be something that's spread, and people need to all participate and take part of it. That's what I was trying to say, and for whatever reason I couldn't freaking get it out.
Well, that's really interesting, because something I learned in finance was that it does kind of need to be a secret. Like, you don't want everybody knowing all the secrets to finance, because then it kind of like diminishes the effect that good investment has. Like, as soon as you know something, like say the stock market, say you know something about the stock market, everyone knows that instantly. You don't have any advantage. Like, you investing in something early does no good, because everyone already knows to invest it, and then it doesn't really, you know, have the same
it erodes the return potential.
Right.
But I think maybe what you're saying is, like, before you even get to that, right? Before you even get to making investments in specific securities or property or whatever, like, just know the basics. Like, control your spending. Like have basic habits that
savings,
right? Because if he saves 20% and you save 20%, like, that doesn't cancel out. Like, that you saving a lot of money doesn't prevent him from saving a lot of money.
Exactly.
You investing in the S&P 500 doesn't prevent you from investing in the S&P 500, right? You can both do it. What you're talking about is kind of further down the line, right? Like, I have an edge, I have an informational edge, but if I exploit it and share it, then the edge evaporates.
Yeah, no doubt.
But I think, I mean, everyone can kind of help themselves by, you know, increasing their knowledge and, you know, practicing good habits.
Right.
Money is very similar to exercise and diet. Right, it's things in, things out. Right, so you know, you want to lose weight, eat less, exercise more. You want to accumulate wealth, make more money, spend less. Right, to save more, and then you have a decision what to do with that capital. Right, are you going to leave it in the bank? Are you going to invest it? Ideally, invest it for the long term. Anyone can do that. Nobody's telling you can't. There are no rules preventing you from saving $50 a week and buying a S&P 500 ETF.
Yeah.
And that's a lot better than zero.
Oh yeah.
And most people basically have little more than zero.
Yeah.
Which is weird, but it's a behavioral thing. It's patience, it's emotional control, impulse control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of our decisions, and this gets back, and they're not unrelated, right? Like the political rhetoric and the emotional reactions to that, and investing money. Like you're playing on the same emotional deficiencies that we have. Like we're not wired to trade off, this cheeseburger right now for a salad later so that I can lose 15 pounds, right? I want it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I don't want to wait to buy a new piece of electronic or a new car. I want it today.
Right.
If I get it today, I'll have less tomorrow. If I don't get it today, I might have more tomorrow. But people can't, we're bad at that.
Right.
Right.
And you'll find any reason to convince yourself that that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Like the easiest, whether it's money, right? There's never enough money. There's never enough time. There is if you want it. Like if you're intentional and you draw boundaries and you enforce them.
Yeah.
And you have the discipline to, push away distractions, you can do anything you want.
Sure.
The easiest ones to think about are when you go to the gym. Or, you go to exercise. Well, I didn't get much sleep last night. I went to bed too late because I got sucked into a show. Or, it's raining out. I don't want to drive in this rain.
Yeah.
Right? I was gonna go for a run anyway, but it's rain.
Yeah, I got you.
There's always an excuse, and
Sure.
and that's true of time and money.
Fair enough. Where does credit play a factor in all that?
We use a lot of it to make up for things.
That's
right?
what I'm saying.
So we buy more than what we have,
Right.
which on the surface it doesn't necessarily have to be bad, but you think you're buying something on credit that you don't need, that you won't have for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And you're borrowing at 20-30% on a credit card.
Ooh.
Not good.
No bueno.
Not good.
Yeah.
That'd be a good investment if you were on the other side of that transaction.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's like some naive little 18-year-old, which used to be me. I used to max out credit cards, and I used to hate interest. I thought it was the devil. I was like, I don't think it should exist. Everything should be interest free, and it's just because my own personal experience with it was on the other end of it.
It's dangerous. A lot of people get themselves into trouble. They end up filing for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
It's fine. These things happen.
Yeah.
But it's just self-control.
Yeah, and I did. I learned self-control, and I learned how to not spend as much, and I learned how to pay off that debt, in large sums, and like every penny I had went to paying off that debt so that I could become debt free. And that was when I learned how to control spending and how to, just basically how to become financially responsible.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's just being aware, it's being responsible. The use of it is fine. I mean, right? If your car breaks down, if you need a new car today.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
You're
gonna save up for the next 4 years so you can go to the dealership and pay cash.
No.
Can't do that because you can't drive yourself to work.
Exactly.
Right. So there are times when it's kind of a necessary evil for most people.
Right.
And there's people obviously that just pay cash for a car or
There
whatever, or a house.
People have gotten to that point,
Yeah.
But some people come in, like I work at a car dealership, and some people come in, they don't have a credit card to their name. They've never bought a car. What do you think a bank's gonna do when they look at that loan? They're like, well, we have nothing to base our loan off of.
Right.
This is a riskier loan than somebody with bad credit, because we have no idea. It's like
Sure. Yeah. We know the big guy with the bad credit is
Right.
going to stiff us. Yeah. Just a matter of when.
We have no idea what you're gonna do.
right. We have no idea. So
Yeah.
let's go ahead and give you the highest, state legal interest rate
Sure.
possible, and
Which
see,
is what?
see what happens.
Which is what, Bubba?
18% on a new car, and like
18% for a car?
24% on a pre-owned.
Oh.
Yeah.
What about those ads that are like good credit, bad credit, no credit,
Yeah.
with approved
Your
credit?
job is your credit.
Well, you know, on that scale, it's fairly easy to manipulate, right? So
Yeah.
you work at a car dealership. I'm sure there's deals where you can still get 0%. You know, MSRP $35,000
Or 0%.
0% for
6 months.
for whatever, right? and it's just you're ultimately paying the same thing, right? Like I could lend you the money at 0% to buy this house, but I'll just mark up the price of the house.
Exactly. Yeah. You do that
You
either
know,
way.
so it's
Well,
kind of the same
it's
thing.
interesting. There's some religions that don't allow the use of interest.
Right.
So you have to buy the rate down by increasing the amount of the loan.
What?
So
On a religious basis?
on a religious basis, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So some like Middle Eastern religions don't believe in interest.
Oh, so like, hey, well, I'm going to buy this car, but because of my religion, you can't charge me interest.
Right.
That being said, this $35,000 car is now what, 55?
40, 50, something
Yeah.
like that.
Oh, okay.
Depending
Fair enough.
How long? Yep.
Fair enough. Well, hey,
Interesting.
speaking of credit.
So yeah, there's a video that
Yes.
Mr. Blanchfield used to, I guess, force every class
That's
to
right.
watch at the beginning of the semester.
That's right.
And take a very rigorous test on
Yeah.
after they watched it. But yeah, it's a very interesting and informative, kind of overview of how our economic system works, how our market works. We're going to play a little snippet,
Yeah.
and then take a short break, and then we'll be right back. Talk about trades.
I want you to pay attention to credit. Credit is the most important part of the economy and probably the least understood. It's the most important part because it's the biggest and most volatile part. Just like buyers and sellers go to the market to make transactions, so do lenders and borrowers. Lenders usually want to make their money into more money, and borrowers usually want to buy something they can't afford, like a house or a car, or they want to invest in something like starting a business. Credit can help both lenders and borrowers get what they want. Borrowers promise to repay the amount they borrow, called principal, plus an additional amount, called interest. When interest rates are high, there is less borrowing because it's expensive. When interest rates are low, borrowing increases because it's cheaper. When borrowers promise to repay and lenders believe them, credit is created. Any two people can agree to create credit out of thin air. That seems simple enough, but credit is tricky because it has different names. As soon as credit is created, it immediately turns into debt. Debt is both an asset to the lender and a liability to the borrower. In the future, when the borrower repays the loan plus interest, the asset and the liability disappear and the transaction is settled. So why is credit so important? Because when a borrower receives credit, he is able to increase his spending. And remember, spending drives the economy. This is because one person's spending is another person's income. Think about it. Every dollar you spend, someone else earns, and every dollar you earn, someone else has spent. So when you spend more, someone else earns more. When someone's income rises, it makes lenders more willing to lend him money because now he's more worthy of credit. A credit-worthy borrower has two things: the ability to repay and collateral. Having a lot of income in relation to his debt gives him the ability to repay. In the event that he can't repay, he has valuable assets to use as collateral that can be sold. This makes lenders feel comfortable lending him money. So increased income allows increased borrowing, which allows increased spending. And since one person's spending is another person's income, this leads to more increased borrowing, and so on. This self-reinforcing pattern leads to economic growth and is why we have cycles. In a transaction, you have to give something in order to get something, and how much you get depends on how much you produce. Over time, we learn, and that accumulated knowledge raises our living standards. We call this productivity growth. Those who are inventive and hardworking raise their productivity and their living standards faster than those who are complacent and lazy. But that isn't necessarily true over the short run. Productivity matters most in the long run, but credit matters most in the short run. This is because productivity growth doesn't fluctuate much, so it's not a big driver of economic swings. Debt is, because it allows us to consume more than we produce when we acquire it, and it forces us to consume less than we produce when we have to pay it back. Debt swings occur in two big cycles. One takes about 5 to 8 years, and the other takes about 75 to 100 years. While most people feel the swings, they typically don't see them as cycles because they see them too up close, day by day, week by week. In this chapter, we're going to step back and look at these three big forces and how they interact to make up our experiences. As mentioned, swings around the line are not due to how much innovation or hard work there is. They're primarily due to how much credit there is. Let's for a second imagine an economy without credit. In this economy, the only way I can increase my spending is to increase my income, which requires me to be more productive and do more work. Increased productivity is the only way for growth. Since my spending is another person's income, the economy grows every time I or anyone else is more productive. If we follow the transactions and play this out, we see a progression like the productivity growth line. But because we borrow, we have cycles. This isn't due to any laws or regulations, it's due to human nature and the way that credit works. Think of borrowing as simply a way of pulling spending forward. In order to buy something you can't afford, you need to spend more than you make. To do this, you essentially need to borrow from your future self. In doing so, you create a time in the future that you need to spend less than you make in order to pay it back. It very quickly resembles a cycle. Basically, anytime you borrow, you create a cycle. This is as true for an individual as it is for the economy. This is why understanding credit is so important, because it sets into motion a mechanical, predictable series of events that will happen in the future. This makes credit different from money. Money is what you settle transactions with. When you buy a beer from a bartender with cash, the transaction is settled immediately. But when you buy a beer with credit, it's like starting a bar tab. You're saying you promise to pay in the future. Together, you and the bartender create an asset and a liability. You just created credit out of thin air. It's not until you pay the bar tab later that the asset and the liability disappear, the debt goes away, and the transaction is settled. The reality is that most of what people call money is actually credit. The total amount of credit in the United States is about $50 trillion, and the total amount of money is only about $3 trillion. Remember, in an economy without credit, the only way to increase your spending is to produce more. But in an economy with credit, you can also increase your spending by borrowing. As a result, an economy with credit has more spending and allows incomes to rise faster than productivity over the short run, but not over the long run. Now, don't get me wrong. Credit isn't necessarily something bad that just causes cycles. It's bad when it finances overconsumption that can't be paid back. However, it's good when it efficiently allocates resources and produces income so you can pay back the debt. For example, if you borrow money to buy a big TV, it doesn't generate income for you to pay back the debt. But if you borrow money to, say, buy a tractor, and that tractor lets you harvest more crops and earn more money, then you can pay back your debt and improve your living standards. In an economy with credit, we can follow the transactions and see how credit creates growth. Let me give you an example. Suppose you earn $100,000 a year and have no debt. You are creditworthy enough to borrow $10,000, say on a credit card. So you can spend $110,000 even though you only earn $100,000. Since your spending is another person's income, someone is earning $110,000. The person earning $110,000 with no debt can borrow $11,000, so he can spend $121,000, even though he has only earned $110,000. His spending is another person's income, and by following the transactions, we can begin to see how this process works in a self-reinforcing pattern. But remember, borrowing creates cycles, and if the cycle goes up, it eventually needs to come down. This leads us into the short-term debt cycle. As economic activity increases, we see an expansion, the first phase of the short-term debt cycle. Spending continues to increase and prices start to rise. This happens because the increase in spending is fueled by credit, which can be created instantly out of thin air. When the amount of spending and incomes grow faster than the production of goods, prices rise. When prices rise, we call this inflation. The central bank doesn't want too much inflation because it causes problems. Seeing prices rise, it raises interest rates. With higher interest rates, fewer people can afford to borrow money, and the cost of existing debts rises. Think about this as the monthly payments on your credit card going up. Because people borrow less and have higher debt repayments, they have less money left over to spend, so spending slows. And since one person's spending is another person's income, incomes drop, and so on and so forth. When people spend less, prices go down. We call this deflation. Economic activity decreases, and we have a recession. If the recession becomes too severe and inflation is no longer a problem, the central bank will lower interest rates to cause everything to pick up again. With low interest rates, debt repayments are reduced and borrowing and spending pick up, and we see another expansion. As you can see, the economy works like a machine. In the short-term debt cycle, spending is constrained only by the willingness of lenders and borrowers to provide and receive credit. When credit is easily available, there's an economic expansion. When credit isn't easily available, there's a recession. And note that this cycle is controlled primarily by the central bank. The short-term debt cycle typically lasts 5 to 8 years and happens over and over again for decades. But notice that the bottom and top of each cycle finish with more growth than the previous cycle and with more debt. Why? Because people push it. They have an inclination to borrow and spend more instead of paying back debt. It's human nature. Because of this, over long periods of time, debts rise faster than incomes, creating the long-term debt cycle. Despite people becoming more indebted, lenders even more freely extend credit. Why? Because everyone thinks things are going great. People are just focused on what's been happening lately. And what's been happening lately? Incomes have been rising. Asset values are going up. The stock market roars. It's a boom. It pays to buy goods, services, and financial assets with borrowed money. When people do a lot of that, we call it a bubble. So even though debts have been growing, incomes have been growing nearly as fast to offset them. Let's call the ratio of debt to income the debt burden. So long as incomes continue to rise, the debt burden stays manageable. At the same time, asset values soar. People borrow huge amounts of money to buy assets as investments, causing their prices to rise even higher. People feel wealthy. So even with the accumulation of lots of debt, rising incomes and asset values help borrowers remain creditworthy for a long time. But this obviously cannot continue forever. And it doesn't. Over decades, debt burdens slowly increase, creating larger and larger debt repayments. At some point, debt repayments start growing faster than incomes, forcing people to cut back on their spending. And since one person's spending is another person's income, incomes begin to go down, which makes people less creditworthy, causing borrowing to go down. Debt repayments continue to rise, which makes spending drop even further. and the cycle reverses itself. This is the long-term debt peak. Debt burdens have simply become too big. For the United States, Europe, and much of the rest of the world, this happened in 2008. It happened for the same reason it happened in Japan in 1989 and in the United States back in 1929. Now the economy begins deleveraging. In a deleveraging, people cut spending, incomes fall, credit disappears, asset prices drop, banks get squeezed, the stock market crashes, social tensions rise, and the whole thing starts to feed on itself the other way. As incomes fall and debt repayments rise, borrowers get squeezed. No longer credit-worthy, credit dries up, and borrowers can no longer borrow enough money to make their debt repayments. Scrambling to fill this hole, borrowers are forced to sell assets. The rush to sell assets floods the market at the same time as spending falls. This is when the stock market collapses, the real estate market tanks, and banks get into trouble. As asset prices drop, the value of the collateral borrowers can put up drops.
That's interesting. I really like this. I really like this video. And Ray Dalio put this together. I don't know much about Ray Dalio.
Sure. So he's the co-founder or founder of Bridgewater Associates.
Uh-huh.
So that was I think it still is the largest hedge fund by assets. So
Really?
there's larger asset managers, BlackRock, Fidelity, and companies like that.
Right.
But in terms of actual hedge fund managers, Bridgewater is the largest.
Really?
Yeah. So he started that, I don't know, 40 years ago, a better part of 40 years ago. And recently, I think, completely stepped away from the business now. I think he's kind of retired. He went back and forth a few times, as founders tend to do.
Sure.
But yeah, so he's a very smart guy. They have a very smart team at Bridgewater. My brother actually worked there for 11 years, I think.
Whoa, that's a long time.
It is for a hedge fund, yeah.
Yeah.
It's based in Westport, Connecticut. I don't know. They have, I don't know, 120, 150 billion dollars under management or something like that.
Wow.
So Ray Dalio personally is probably worth 15, 20 billion dollars.
Oh, man.
So he's doing okay.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, he's doing just fine.
And just so everyone knows, we're going to post links to that video, the other website that we were on. What was the name of it again?
Fred.
Fred.gov.
Yeah.
Fred.gov. We're going to post all that in the description so anyone can, just access it, whenever they want.
Yeah, no doubt. Good. I mean, any knowledge, any information is good information, especially something like this. So.
Yeah. And also, speaking of, the channel, we just reached 100 subscribers.
Sweet.
Live during this
Congratulations.
podcast.
Live during the podcast.
Thank you, Mr. Craig Blanchfield, for being technically number 101. I think there was like a tie.
Somebody snuck in
there.
But thank you everyone who's subscribed, and please, if you haven't yet, if you're watching this, please subscribe. Subscribe, because I think nowadays you have to ask in order to get someone to subscribe. Typically, you have to chime in, please like and subscribe, and be sure to turn notifications and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. That's like the standard thing to say now.
I don't think we've done that yet. So
we haven't.
It's just kind of word of mouth organic, which is cool at the
Right.
same time.
Yeah, it is. To get 100 subscribers like that, word of mouth. We're not trying to do it every single episode. Please like and subscribe and mash and mush the notifications button.
Yeah.
That's what everybody likes to say. Yeah. Smash it. Just smash it. Yeah. We don't do that, but whatever. But yeah, it is good, man. Obviously, again, what we're trying to do is just try to put some good knowledge out there. You know what I'm saying? And get some good information out there. We want people to. I genuinely want people to do well. I know I got on a little weird tirade about I don't care about people's children. Like, I mean, I care about people's children. Like, I care about our society. I love America. All right. Please don't send me to Guantanamo.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, the further somebody is away, typically the less like concerned you are with with them
Perhaps.
Personally.
Personally. But
people outside your bubble.
But
Like,
if you look at it collectively,
sure, yeah. You want the world. We're all part of the same globe. We're all humans. We're all on the same team.
Oh, we can get real John Lennon with it.
Right.
Imagine all the people.
Just imagine.
Just imagine all the people. But for sure, want our country to do well. And I mean, any kind of information concerning the economy and what you can do to better your habits financially. Let's put that out there. Let's let people know.
So on that note, Craig, do you have any advice for somebody who's either you can do different levels, just starting out, just barely, starting out. Maybe they're 18, maybe they just graduated college, just trying to figure it out, where to invest, how to invest, what to invest in. Or maybe someone who has been doing it for a while, maybe where to start looking to move their money to, maybe?
Sure. Well, if somebody's starting out, they should be focused on developing good habits, right? So the person starting out should use their money for education beyond formal education. So make the mistakes, right? Because it's cheap, because you don't have any money.
Right.
Don't worry about your asset allocation. That'll be important later on. But when you're first starting out, the money doesn't I got to put 75% in stocks and 25% in bonds, but you only have $1,000. Like, it doesn't really move the needle much. So focus on developing the good habits of saving money, investing money, and understanding what your limits are, and focusing on developing your career and making more money and building a nest egg. But the habits need to be developed right away. And it's never been easier, right? You can automate basically everything.
Yeah.
You get paid as direct deposit into your bank. And then you have, your Schwab or your Fidelity accounts, and the money can just be dispersed.
Right.
Bills should be paid electronically, automatically. Like, nobody should be writing a check. You should never pay a late fee.
Yeah.
Like that's table stakes for basic personal finance. In terms of developing good habits, like, focus on the process more than the magnitude. So what do I mean by that? Develop the habit of saving with every pay period.
Okay.
I don't care if it's $1. But set it up. Set up the infrastructure. Set up the link between your checking account and your brokerage account, so that the money moves. If you can only do $1, it's better than nothing. It's terrible, but you can do better. but at least get comfortable with the idea that when you get paid today, $1 is coming out and going somewhere else that you need to then make a separate decision about.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, I was gonna say, can I ask you, do you allocate dollars or do you do percents? What do you recommend more as far as paychecks are concerned?
I mean, whatever is easier. To me, it's the same, right? I mean, if you make $1,000 a week and you allocate $200, it's 20%. I mean, I don't care if you call it 20% or $200.
Yeah.
That's just what it is.
Well, the reason why I ask is because it's not always $1,000. Because some people some people can make more, some people will make less, depending on whatever the case may be. So, do you say, hey, it's going to be 10% because that way, when I'm making less, it's not always the,
Yeah, that's fine, because you don't want to put yourself in the short term bind, right? Where you don't have grocery money because you've already allocated to your investment portfolio.
Exactly.
So a percentage is fine. I mean, typically, if you want to be successful with saving and investing, so you actually have meaningful money, it should be north of 10% of your gross.
Okay.
I mean, minimum. Ideally closer to 20. I know that it's painful, but if you're just starting out, you don't have any. You haven't had the opportunity for that lifestyle creep yet. Yeah. So you get your first job after undergrad or whatever, and you make $70,000 a year.
Nice.
Fine.
That's pretty good.
I mean, fine. So, I don't know, save 20% of the growth, say $14,000.
Okay.
Or, 21, and save 30%. I don't know, whatever you can do, and then manage your bills from there.
Got it.
Right? The idea, it's in a lot of personal finance books, the idea of paying yourself first.
Got it.
That's what that means.
Yeah, pay yourself first.
Like if I just remove, your paycheck hits the account, and $200 moves out, it's gone
Yeah.
Yeah.
forever.
Because if it's there,
not forever,
if it's
but-
there, you're gonna spend it.
Of course, or if you wait, if you pay all your bills first, and you're gonna save what's left over, I
Right.
can promise you, there's never gonna be any time left over. I was thinking about that idea today. Actually, we bumped the time to start this twice, right? I asked to bump it an hour, and then you asked to bump it an hour, and guess what? Like my day, filled up. Like if we had
quick.
stuck to the original time 2 hours earlier, I would have been here on time 2 hours early. But because I had that extra 2 hours, I spent it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There it is.
If I have the money in my checking, it's just going to get spent.
Human behavior.
It needs to be removed and separated. And I know that's just some mental accounting for a lot of people, but it's different, right? So that's what I would focus on as somebody that's young, right? Perfect the process, get comfortable with it, and then ramp it up. Will you have to get comfortable with making some choices and being disciplined, right? I can promise you, I've been in an office with people that was their first job, making far less money than I was making at the time, and they go out to lunch every day. That's fine. Everyone needs to eat lunch, but every day, right? You make $60,000 a year, and you're spending
$15 a day.
$15 a day.
Yeah.
Right, so you're spending $3,600 a year on lunch.
Whew.
Yeah.
Out of 60.
Yeah.
But then that same person will tell me that they can't save money, or they get discouraged. Right? People get discouraged very easily. I can only save $200 a month.
Right.
Okay, well $2,400 at the end of the year is a far cry from zero.
Yeah.
And you'll increase those contributions because you already have the process in place.
Right.
You make more money, you have a windfall, whatever, you add to it, and it will accumulate over time. And if you invest it, it not only will accumulate because of your deposits, but it should grow with compounded returns.
Depending on what you're invested in.
I mean, for most people, it should just be plain vanilla stuff, right? I mean,
Yeah.
ETFs, index funds, but I use ETFs typically. Me personally, investments look a lot like what I would describe as an enhanced indexing strategy. Typically, 80-90% of capital is invested in passive, low cost, transparent, liquid strategies.
Yeah.
And then if I want to go play stock market with the other 10 or 20%, it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't trade, I don't gamble, right? Like the individual stocks I own are old and established companies.
Okay.
Right? I think
That pay dividends, probably.
yeah, of course. My two largest individual positions are like Coca-Cola and Procter and Gamble. That's not a stock tip. That's not advice.
Yeah.
That's just, okay, Coca-Cola has been in business for 140 years or 130 years. And it's paid a dividend for the last 70.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not going away.
It's a safe
Got
bet.
it. Got it. I get it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna make 50 times my money
Right.
in a year.
Yeah.
But I'll make 50 times my money in 50 years.
Yeah.
Right.
And then when you finally said, "Hey, we're done teaching," or whatever else you might have planned for your future, you're gonna be good.
I hope so.
You'll be able to live.
I mean that's the idea, is to keep things simple and allow it and give it the time to compound. And people get discouraged again. We have short attention spans. We're impatient. So am I. It's painful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, I want a new BMW. But if I get a new BMW today, that means that changes the arithmetic around
Yeah.
some choice that I'm going to have in the future.
So then, on top of allocating what you spend and what you, immediately paying yourself back first, so what you save and invest in, you should also manage those things that you're going to spend or apply for credit for, like the BMW or whatever. I feel like that goes also hand in hand as well, right?
I mean, me personally, the way I manage things is different. It doesn't always fit within a textbook setting, but that's okay.
Yeah.
For example, I won't buy a car unless I could pay cash for it, but I could buy 3 of them.
Dang.
because
Yeah.
if I can't do that, it's arbitrary. I just made up that rule. Just a personal thing.
Just a personal thing for you. Yeah.
You know, can you really afford it? Because at the end of the day, what's important to me, and what ultimately, whether you realize it or not, what ultimately ends up being important to most people is not the stuff that they can buy in terms of things, but time and freedom and flexibility. It's very undervalued. I mean, people will agree with me and nod their head, but you know, are you going to make the tough decision today so that when you get fired tomorrow, okay, or laid off or whatever, you're good?
Yeah.
Right? Because the BMW is going to be, you know, $1,200 or $1,500 a month, and that is going to limit. That's going to reduce my flexibility. I might have to take another job that pays less or that is worse in some other way because I need it, because the car payments due, the mortgage is due. The income stopped, but the expenses didn't.
Yeah.
But if you have a big safety net, now you have more flexibility. Your boss is being an asshole. Fuck you. Like, I'm out.
I'm out. Yeah.
Like, and I'll tell you, you know, in my experience, you know, whatever that is, a lot of bosses or supervisors or employers like prey on people. The assumption that you're stuck.
Yeah.
So don't do that. That's in your power. You can't necessarily do it overnight. It takes some time, you know. But I've been in the room with firm partners, and they've literally made comments like, "What's he gonna do?" You know, we're gonna send this guy, and we're gonna make him do this terrible task because.
What choice does he have?
What choice does he have? You know, his wife's pregnant, or they just had their, you know, third kid.
Yeah, they just bought a house.
Right, right. So they know that you're strapped or you're overextended or close to it. So don't hand power over to people. It's in your best interest, in your power, to save a little bit of money. Okay, like be disciplined because it'll be worth it later. Give you flexibility. You don't have to take a shitty job. You can leave a shitty job, and then you can also spend time doing what you want more. So
Yeah.
That's what money's for.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, great. It would be
That's
great.
good advice.
It would be great to do that with a Ferrari. But if I had to choose,
Yeah.
you know, never having to go to work or to answer to a boss again or Ferrari.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an easy decision.
right.
That's good advice for people getting into it, man. Pay yourself first. You know what I mean? Manage your costs, manage your spending so that you can
be patient. Don't get discouraged.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yes, the first year you save $3,000. That is not $1 million.
No.
Turns out
not.
$3,000 is not $1 million.
No matter how you math it, yeah.
Carry the one.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work.
And people will get discouraged. And when people get discouraged, they say, fuck it. And then they'll dip into that money and blow it on, you know, a new phone.
Yeah.
Because they're like, it wasn't moving the needle anyway. Well, you're not giving it a chance to move the needle. Right. We live in a non-linear world, right? We live in a power law world, meaning, you know, it was only $2,000 or $3,000 at the end of the first year, but you're going to save $6,000 next year plus returns, and that's going to build on itself. So you're 22 or 25 now, and you know you'd rather have the phone or whatever. But when you're 40 or 50, that might be $500,000 or $1 million, or you know, depending on how aggressive you are.
So obviously, this $3,000 is not being saved in just your regular bank savings account. This is being invested, isn't it? It's being invested. In
I mean that's easy to do, right? Okay. I mean, you can set up a brokerage account at Schwab or Fidelity or whomever.
Yeah.
In 10 minutes.
See, I never was told to do that whenever I first started in the workforce.
Right.
And that's the one regret that I have is that I wish somebody would have explained to me.
Yeah.
Hey, this is what you need to do.
Right.
This is what's going to help you in the future. Because I obviously did not do any of that, and you know it shows because of whatever. But
I don't know what whatever means.
His balance sheet. That's where it shows.
All I'm saying is, if I had started that back then, I would have substantially
Sure,
more amount of money than I have now, just based on
What's funny is
having started so much later than then. So
yeah, and you'd have more flexibility. You could choose different jobs. You could not worry about paying to go back to graduate school or
see this the kind of stuff that I learned like in your class and some other classes I wish they would have taught in high school. I know people have said that probably for a long time now, but and of course there's the whole thing where it's like, okay, well, you kind of have to pay for that kind of knowledge, because hell, if everyone had it, then
right, who's going to teach it in high school,
right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, the teachers don't necessarily even have that knowledge themselves.
Right.
You have to hire a professor essentially to teach that,
or somebody. I mean, probably not your gym teacher,
right?
Or your English teacher,
right?
Or your math teacher,
for sure. So,
I mean, some of them are probably qualified to do it, but
yeah,
I don't know.
What's funny is on the opposite end of that spectrum, as I was told to save, and save by matching the company match on the 401k.
Right.
Here's a stark. Well, it's not a difference. I guess it's similarity. Is that I can't touch that shit, even though I've got it there and it's grown for me and it's done well. I can't just quit my job and just take and just cash that out. I could,
sure,
but it's going to come with a very
you're
very steep
pay
penalty,
taxes and then penalties,
and a very steep penalty. So, what I wish I would have was told was what he just said earlier before we even started the cast, I think, which was just do the match, and then whatever you would have done extra into that, actually open your own, which I have with Vanguard. You know what I mean? And invest there because I can pull from that. Well, provided it's not an IRA, because those are still the same stipulations as far as. And that's the thing, you've got to learn that stuff. Right. You got to know
exactly.
You can't sit there and be like, well, I'm going to do an IRA. It's like, well, you won't be able to touch that till you're 55 and a half. So
yeah, I mean, there's still people that think that they contribute to a 401k, then they leave that job that they have to cash it out.
Oh
yeah,
man.
Don't do that.
Yeah, please don't do that.
Yeah, you roll it into an IRA.
Yeah, and that's what I did when I left my first job and moved over to where I'm working at now. Is I rolled that over, and where I felt like I should have rolled it over into the company for whatever reason, I decided to roll it over into my own individual with Vanguard, just because I liked the fact that they had. Remember, I was talking about the expense ratios and things, and they
have more flexibility.
More different funds and things I can choose to, invest in and what have you. So I chose to do that. And
even though you can't touch it now, it's going to benefit you later.
No doubt. But as far as being able to, anyways, it's good advice what you said, no doubt. Match, do your company match, and if you wanted to contribute more so that you would max out, so to speak. Consider doing that into something else that's your own. Would take that percentage and do that into something else that's your own.
Yeah.
That you can pull in and pull of if you need to, I suppose,
right.
At any point in time.
Obviously, it's not quite as tax efficient, right? Because, 401k contribution is pre-tax, so it reduces your taxable income. So if you don't go up to whatever the limit is, then you're going to be taxed on that amount. But I think that it's worth the flexibility. Plus, you don't know what tax rates are going to be in the future. So, so you're kind of diversifying your bets on your taxes today versus taxes in the future.
Exactly. You know what's funny? You know what I'm doing now? And this is the first year I've done this. Well, I'm still maxing out, but I've decided to actually choose to put everything into, because my 401k has a Roth option. So I decided to put everything into a Roth option. And at some point, I'm pretty sure I thought that you can only contribute, like, I'm sure the limits have gone up. It's considerably less, but it's like 75, maybe 6,500 into a Roth versus the 22.5 for a 401k. However, I was told that if it's a 401k Roth option, you can still do, the 22.5 in the Roth. And I was like, is that the case? I don't know. I guess let's see what it does. So I chose to put everything into a Roth this year because I'm trying to match those accounts now. One's going to be the pre-tax and one's going to be the post-tax, and we're going to try to pull from both when the time comes. Yeah. But what that means now is that my taxable income, is now out for the government to. They used to be able to not touch all of it. Now they'll be able to touch all of it. And so I had to increase my tax. What's the word?
your claim.
Yeah, whatever my liability, tax liability, I had to increase that.
I mean, they can touch, realize capital gains and any income, dividends and interest thrown off in a taxable account. But they can't touch the principal that you've put into it.
Right. Yeah. So, anyways, we'll see how that goes. I don't know. This is the first year. This is the first year, and that's what I'm saying. This is kind of trial and error for me, to kind of figure it out. But hopefully, I get to a point, maybe like Mr. Ray Dalio, where I can be like, hey, through trial and error and through different conversations and research, I've just discovered that this is probably the best thing to do, and I could pass that down to my kids. Speaking about especially with the housing market, I even kind of told I didn't tell my kids this, but I was kind of talking about it with my wife. I was kind of like, hey, look, it is difficult out there to get a house nowadays, to own property and what have you, with whatever different reasons, them being the interest rates being too high, or everything just kind of inflated up. Now my house when I bought it in 2017 was $249,000, and now I have Harris County telling me that it's actually valued at $375,000. Well, I bet you would tell me that. So anyways, so this is the first year I protested as well. But anyways, I was thinking like, hey, as long as my kids are working, going to school, whatever the case may be, but even if they're working, like, hey, stay here as long as you can, dude. Stay here and stack up some money. Don't go rent or whatever. Just stay here. I got you. Maybe you can put a little something to the light bill or whatever, but build your money up, save it up, and then
don't just save it in the closet, but save it in some type of investment account.
Something where you can take it out too and not get any kind of real penalty except for the capital gains or whatever. They doesn't call it a penalty. It's just
you can just do an interest-bearing savings account, and that would be better than just keeping it in the shoebox.
Right.
Well, so okay, certain like online banks will do that. Like Betterment is one that will give you an interest-bearing savings account a lot more than just your standard credit union or bank, right? That gives you 0.25%.
A lot of those have moved, and there's other options too, right? Like you can buy a money market fund in your brokerage account, which is effectively a savings account that you'll, whatever the rates are now, 4 or 5%,
and that's good.
Yeah,
and that's what I got with Betterment, and I chose to do that whenever I said that I don't want Wells Fargo, at the time it was Wells Fargo, now it's whatever, managing my escrow account.
Right.
I said, I'm going to manage it myself. Yeah. I'm going to put it in this, and it's going to earn 4 or 5%. And
what about
during the time?
I-bonds, I hear good things about. I mean, what do you know about I-bonds?
Yeah, sure. So you have to buy them directly from the government, which I guess their website is old. Let's call it that. And it can be clunky, and I've heard that from an administrative perspective, it's kind of a pain in the butt. You were capped. I forget the amount. I don't know, $10,000 or $15,000, I think, per person, per Social Security number. I mean, you own the inflation-linked bonds. I mean, it has been a good deal, but I mean, with inflation coming down, you're not getting those huge rates anymore. So depending on your circumstances, it may not be worth the hassle, to put $20,000 into a savings, a higher yielding savings account. I don't know. As long as you're just not getting zero anymore.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. So, what are I-bonds?
I-bonds?
Yeah, they're linked to inflation, right? So typically, you want to cover, like, if you're preserving wealth, you want to keep up with the rate of inflation.
Okay.
So the bonds that you see, or bond yields that you see, like on CNBC, those are nominal yields. So those include the real rate and inflation. What we've seen in the last few years is that the real rate is actually negative, right? So
because inflation?
The inflation is high, right? So, a year ago or whatever, you have 7% inflation, you get 3% on your bond, or 4%. So you're upside down. Yep. So the I bonds adjust for, right? Treasury Direct is the website.
Perfect.
Right? So they adjust to reflect the rate of inflation so that you have a real return. Now, it's a little bit more nuanced than this, right? So if you really want to get into the weeds, you go back to Fred and you'd look at break-even rates, which is the rate at which it's either better or worse to own a nominal bond versus a TIP, a Treasury inflation protected security.
Which is that?
Effectively, yes.
I-bond.
Yeah. So it's a little bit more complicated. At this point, I would probably tilt toward just regular bonds, regular treasuries versus I-bonds or TIPS.
Bonds is something that should be in everyone's portfolio.
I mean, most people. I mean, it's a good place to, it's ballast, right? So it reduces the overall volatility of returns. It does reduce your long-term expected returns as well. So if your investment horizon is 50 years, you should effectively not have bonds today.
So as you get closer, then you do, right? That's when that shift happens.
Yeah, and that would answer
closer to retirement. That is
right. The second part of Cody's question, what do you do when okay, we talked about somebody starting out.
Right.
As you progress, there's different issues and there's different considerations, and it is a moving target, right? So, great, you're going to retire at some age, right? I don't know if you're going to wait for Social Security, and there's all these like math questions you can ask yourself, but like some of it is just real life questions. Like, are you going to live to 100?
Yeah.
I knew you're going there. Yeah.
If you're going to live to 100, then, or if a lot of more people are going to live to 100 or 90 or 95, then a lot of investors are probably allocated too conservatively. They have too much in bonds and not enough in stocks.
Yeah.
Because they think, I'm 60 years old, I'll be dead by 80, I got 15 years and I got to live off of it. Mm-hmm. Well, that might be true, but if you live to 100, you got another 30, 40 years ahead of you.
What are you going to do?
That's a lifetime. You need to be allocated to support that. You need that growth. You need to surpass the rate of inflation, and you need to preserve your purchasing power at the very least. So, those dynamics have evolved over time, and that's for regular people. For wealthy people, their investment horizon should effectively be forever. In other words, if you're 70 years old with $100 million,
oh yeah,
like you're not. I mean, unless you have really expensive taste and you're just going berserk because you're whatever. You're
not spending it all.
You're not spending it all, so it's going to someone else.
Yeah.
If it's going to someone else, it's either the government,
no,
family,
yes,
or charity.
Maybe.
Right? There's not really any other options, realistically. Yeah. So, if it goes to the government, whatever. So put that to the side. If it's going to kids, grandkids, or charity, like their investment horizons extend way beyond your lifetime.
No doubt.
Right? You're 70 and you're looking at investing and you're like, well, why am I so aggressive? Well, because you have a 10-year-old grandson. Right. And this is his money now.
Generational wealth.
Or you're going to give some of this money to, the local food bank or some other nonprofit that has a perpetual need.
Yeah.
Like endowments and pension funds and other institutional investors, they view it over a much longer time horizon because the need is forever.
Right.
So if you're too conservative, you'll shoot yourself in the foot, and individuals can do that too.
Yeah. I guess as long as you have what you need at that time frame to sustain yourself to what we would consider the likely age that you would survive, I suppose, then yes, why not the rest of it go where it needs to go? But, hasn't the government done things now where there's that inheritance tax, or is that what it's called?
Estate tax.
Estate tax. Thank you. The estate tax, essentially.
So that only realistically applies to a very, very small number of people.
Yeah, it's probably not going to apply to us, right?
So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to predict your future.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But I don't know where it's at. I think it's somewhere in the $12 million range per person. So if you're married, it's portable, meaning you don't pay any federal estate taxes until $1 over that amount after the second person dies. So I think it's in the ballpark of 12. The exemption is $12 million.
Meaning
you don't get taxed on the first $12 million of your estate.
Oh, okay.
So if it's 12 million and you're a married couple, the first $24 million of your estate is tax exempt, federal taxes. Okay. So you only start paying the estate tax
after that
at $1 over 24 million, or what I forget what the exempt is. It might be a little bit higher or lower than that, but it's in that ballpark.
I get what you're saying.
So there's very few people that pay any federal estate taxes. Now, a lot of states have an estate tax, and generally the exemptions are much lower.
Like Texas probably has that.
I don't know that off the top of my head.
We'd have to research it.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
And that's when you die?
What's that?
You pay the estate tax on your estate when?
After you die, your estate pays it.
Okay.
So effectively, your heirs pay it.
Gotcha.
Right. And it's probably more likely going to come from whatever inheritance you would have amassed.
Yeah.
But again,
that would be passed down.
What I'm saying is the exemptions are enormous.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things like, if you're on a social media platform or the doomsayers or whatever, people are like, oh, plus they tax you when you die. And it's like, okay, I guess you're worth $30 million then. Right? Because if your dad's like a blue collar guy and your mom's like a stay at home and you inherit, $50,000, there's no tax.
There's no tax. It's all 50 you. And that's funny because that's exactly where I picked up where he was coming from, because the conversations that I've been privy to, again, at work and what have you, where, they're going to tax you. And I'm like, damn, man, that's a lot of money. So I get it now. There's a threshold. So you have to be worth $24 million in order for.
And then it's marginal.
And then what are you doing working here if your family's got that?
and while we're there, just to throw it in,
Yeah.
People have to understand how income taxes work. I'm not an accountant. I'm not some kind of tax specialist. Our tax system is progressive, and when you move up a tax bracket, it's only applicable to the dollars above
that,
not below. So this idea, and again, this is a lack of education issue. People are like, well, I'm not going to work overtime because it'll bump me up into the next tax bracket and I'll make less money. That's not how the math works. Ever. Ever.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just want to put that out there.
No.
Work more and make more.
Yeah.
That's how that works.
Agreed. And that was definitely the credo that my grandfather lived by, because he would say that same thing, and he worked in the same industry I did. And all those guys back then would be, why are you working all this overtime, Tom? Because he was named Thomas. Why are you working all this overtime, Tom? Because, they're just going to take more out in taxes. He's like, don't you understand that at the end of the day, the bottom dollar is still more than what you freaking sat home and didn't do. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's why I try never to pass up any overtime as much as I can, personally. You know what I mean? No, like I said, our production is low and everything.
And there could be deductions, for other, for insurances, because you get an extra paycheck this month, or like there could be oddball things that skew it.
Yeah.
But realistically, you are taxed per year.
Mm-hmm.
When you get paid every 2 weeks, you're not paying any taxes. Taxes are being withheld.
Right.
You settle up at the end, in the spring of the following year. Right. How much do you owe, or how much is owed back
to me? Got
right.
Yeah.
That's when when the accounts are settled, not paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And I think people struggle with that as well.
And I get it, and it's I do get it, because it's concerning, especially to the guys who are counting every dollar, damn near every penny. You know what I'm saying? And I can understand where the anxiety can originate from, but at the same time, it's like, hey, this is just one of those things that we got to do.
Sure.
There's no real way around it. You're not gonna freaking, there's no cheat code. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think that applies to a lot of things and a lot of things that we've talked about today, right? Like, there's no shortcut, there's no cheat code. I mean, there is if you're born to the right parents or into the right family. You know, you're so wealthy people have babies too.
Yeah.
And you might be one of them, and congratulations, you're lucky.
Yeah.
But other than that, there's really no shortcut.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to come from somewhere, you know, being smart, hardworking, disciplined. That's all of those things are kind of, I mean, the smart, you can work on that, but
Sure.
You know, mostly within your control.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay, are things rigged? I don't know. Is it unfair? Of course. Of course. You know, Ray Dalio's got kids. You know, Warren Buffett's got kids. Bill Gates has kids. All those kids are, I mean, all these people have done the giving pledge so that the kids won't inherit tens of billions of dollars, but they've had a different upbringing than most people as a result of their parents' success and wealth. Is that fair? No. Is it reality? Yes. What are you going to do about it? Right? You still, right? To your point earlier, like, you know the rules of the game.
Yeah.
Are you playing or not?
Yeah, I mean, there's only two things you could do. You could either participate or not participate, right? You either choose to invest your money wisely, or as wise as you can, or not. I mean, which is going to be more beneficial at the end of the day? Probably participating, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, participate and invest. You have no choice. I don't say you have no choice. You have a choice.
You have a choice. Yeah,
but
those are your choices.
But those are your choices. but that's definitely one of the better choices.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I guess when it comes to choosing investments, I know you had kind of spoke about it earlier. I mean, you can play the safe bet, or you can just, do some more research and decide that, hey, maybe this company is on the brink of something. I did that with an ETF recently. I did it with an ETF that they basically grouped a bunch of companies together that are involved in, like, the metaverse, that whole building of the metaverse. And I was like, hey, this virtual reality, especially with Apple coming out with the Vision Pro and all this other things. I was like, NVIDIA is one of the companies. There's a few other companies. I have to pull it up to really show it to you all. But basically, I got the drift. I was like, hey, this might be where we might be trending later. So I was like, let me put some money into this. And actually, they had the ticker Meta. They literally had the ticker META. They had that years ago.
Right.
And I think Zuckerberg was like, I will pay a hefty fee to have that.
Scooped it up?
Yeah, because he did. He ended up paying it for that because it later changed to METV. Is the ETF that I'm invested in now.
Right.
That was, like I said, informed with all these different companies, but.
Yeah, no, I think that it's reasonable to make some of these long-term bets on what you perceive as being a long-term trend.
Yeah.
Don't put all your money in it. You can be wrong.
Yeah.
But it gets back to, kind of basic investing principles or trading. It's not just, how much money you could make, it's the probability of that outcome. Right? So we're really thinking about expected returns, which is, marrying those two ideas, the possible outcome with the probability of those outcomes.
Right.
Right. So, I mentioned, like, two of the largest individual holdings, stocks that I have are, Coca-Cola and Procter & Gamble. Not sexy, but I'm pretty sure that they're going to keep paying their dividend. They'll eke out a little bit of growth over time, and those dividends will be reinvested, and I'll get paid dividends on those dividends, and it'll compound over time. So it's a low volatility and it's a low excitement investment, but it's a high probability or higher probability, as opposed to buying a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
You can make $400 million, but there's a 1 in 400, 1 in $500 million or 1 in 500 million chance, or whatever the odds are on lotteries now.
Right.
So the expected outcome the expected value of that ticket might actually be negative. And I don't know where I haven't looked at a lottery ticket in a while, but so you have to do that. So looking at it long term, you can also think about the returns aren't necessarily just going to be 10%, right?
Yeah.
So you're buying into a fund with the idea, ideally, and hopefully you size it appropriately so you don't care what it does day to day. You hold it for 30 years and you were right. And it's gone up 100 times your money. That's good, right? So now that's really skewing the outcome. And there's a lot of investments like that, but you have to give them time. But you won't know. So if you had 10 of those investments, maybe 9 of them go bust or turn into nothing. Then the one, it's kind of a venture capital model, right? You know that some of them are just going to be losers. Some of them are going to do nothing. And then hopefully you hit a grand slam on something over a long period of time, and that pays for all the losers, right? So you want to try to skew those, the probabilities in your favor, whether it's spreading it around or buying, safer bets, but making the outlandish bets, but just sizing it appropriately so maybe you can make a lot of them.
Right.
I mean, you can't be right all the time.
No, I understand that, but at the same time, you got to think like when you're mentioning all this, it's like, well, dang, how much money am I actually using at every one time for it to go to each one of these different little investment deals?
How much
know
can
what I
you
mean?
gamble? Yeah, how much do you set aside? How much do you take to Vegas?
Well, and so that's why I was saying, and that's what we were saying.
You take as much as you can lose.
Well, and that's why we were saying earlier. Is it a dollar amount? Is it a percentage amount? You know, obviously you figure that part out. Obviously, the entire time you're investing, you're continuing to invest the entire time. But there's got to come a point in time when you do, like, I know you don't look at it every day, but at some point you have to relook at it, and reevaluate and go, okay, wait a second.
Actively manage it.
Yeah, wait a second. I thought this was doing well. Maybe it's not. Maybe I researched it wrong or whatever. And now I need to cut, take my losses and then go move them somewhere else.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Don't get fooled by the sunk cost fallacy where you just
I'm already in it.
I'm already in it, so let me just keep on hoping for the best.
Yeah, I mean, and it depends, because I'll tell you right now that ETF where I invested in with the metaverse, it took a dive, and I could look it up now probably, and it's probably still low. But I'm still in there with the money that I originally put in
there.
And I'm just holding it.
And I don't know enough about that specific fund or what they're doing. But what if that's a theme that plays out over the course of 20 years, and you bought it a month ago, and it took a nosedive, right? Is that enough information then to change course? Right. Again, we live in a power law world or exponential law world, not a linear world. So things can look flat for a really long time until they're not.
And honestly, that was crypto. Let's just be real. That was Bitcoin. That was Bitcoin came out in 2012, 2014 or something like that, and did fucking nothing until it did a little blip in 2017, but then really launched.
Oh, it launched in 2017, or it did a little thing in 2017.
Yeah, that's what I said. It did a little something.
Yeah,
and then but then it freaking, and that's when everybody became a crypto bro and everything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but look at it now; it's back down. But then,
right. So, but think about the scale of those returns, also, right? So, you said 2012. What was Bitcoin trading at?
I'd have to look it up, and I could, but
$100.
$100.
Yeah, I think it was less than that.
$100 a coin, and it went up to 67,000.
Yeah.
Right. So so you made 670 times your money or whatever. Is that going to happen again? It's at what, 28,000?
2014. So in 2014, it was.
Is it going to go up 700x from here?
I don't know. Did people think it would go up to 67,000?
I think what you're
less than.
Well, I think it's going to zero, but that's a different conversation.
see, and I think what he may be asking. I'm sorry. I think what he may be asking too is it sustainable? You know what I mean? The fact that it went up like it did. Clearly what the history has shown that it's not. It's not a very predictable, like in the safe bet index funds or anything like that, or a company that's actually put something out that's of value. Because Tesla, like just take Tesla for instance.
Yeah. Sure.
Tesla at one point was trading for the tens of dollars, and now you can't even touch it, unless you got some money. You know what I mean? And so that's the point. I think maybe more. I could be wrong, but it sounds like you're trying to make is this cryptocurrency sustainable? Is it going to continue to make these returns, or is it going to keep doing these crazy things where it shoots right up and then it's just going to crash right back down? And if people really truly like use it as like, this is my sole investment model, I'm putting everything on black/crypto.
Never,
you know what I mean?
Never a good idea in general.
Yeah, right.
Bad
You know what I
idea.
mean? You see what I mean? So
Very bad
Been
idea.
there, done that. Yeah.
I would say that maybe crypto's now a new thing where you can allocate a percentage of your investment portfolio.
Put it in your portfolio. See what happens.
And then let it be a small percentage. Let it be something like what you said you can lose. You know what I mean?
Yeah, treat it either as a pure speculative thing or as insurance on being wrong. Meaning, okay, I don't believe in these things or the value of Bitcoin or whatever, but maybe I own a little bit just in case I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Right? I'm okay with being wrong and then making money from making a mistake.
Yeah, sure.
If it goes to zero, position it so it's annoying but not catastrophic.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I used to own a little bit, but I own nothing now.
I did that with Shiba Inu once. I just took it on a whim. I was like, you never know what's going to happen. And then all of a sudden, boom. I was like, well, all right.
Boom as in what?
It shot up, yeah. For a while. Shiba Inu was like the new Doge.
Did you cash out?
A little bit, yeah. Most of it. But left a little bit in. Just in case it did it again.
Hey, the idea of that paper money, right? Like if you put $1,000 in, it makes 2,000. You take that $1,000 out immediately, and whatever's left over, just let it do what it do. What are your thoughts on that?
It's some mental accounting. Keep in mind that when the idea is that you're playing with the house money, right?
Yeah.
But it's actually just your money.
It's actually money, yeah.
It's always been your money. Your 1,000 became 2,000. You now have $2,000.
Yeah.
If you started today with $2,000,
okay,
would your approach be different? Would you still buy this at this price? Would you do something differently? Right? There is no house. There's no house money. It's just your money, whether it goes up in value or down in value.
Okay.
But I understand why, right? Like you're de-risking the position. You double your money, you take a little off the table. If it continues to do well, you have exposure. If it flops, you haven't gone broke. You haven't lost everything.
Right. And I think that's that's that concept of that strategy.
Yeah. I mean, it could be a little bit more nuanced than that, but I'm not. I mean, in general, I think I'm not a big crypto
enthusiast or supporter.
No, because I mean, think about how you were just talking about this trade that you made in shitcoin or whatever, like Doge shit or Shiba Inu or whatever.
Right.
Nothing you said had anything to do with what it is, what it does, and how it represents value
in the world around us, right?
Right. You bought it and it blew up, and you traded some out and you made money.
I get that.
Right? I mean
I truly get that.
That's a slot machine.
Yeah, I truly get that.
It's like almost like a stock where it could become popular overnight.
Yeah, but what value does it present to the world at large?
Sure,
I feel like.
Yeah, well, there's obviously a lot to talk about that. I mean, you could go on and on about potential value, down the road value, but today's value is limited because crypto is limited in its use case. Its utility, right? You can't do anything with it except trade it right now, except for this few cryptos where you can actually
the ATM cryptos and things
transact
like that.
online.
But I mean, what is the incentive to transact?
Anonymity, security, and decentralization.
So I'll give you the anonymity to a point, but theoretically, all those transactions are recorded, right? So you're not anonymous.
Right, and anonymous to
Right, those
people that you want to be anonymous to, like the government or
So what? So you don't pay tax on it or something, or what?
sure, there's that,
or you're buying drugs,
you can buy
or
things
murders.
secretly.
I mean, what's this? It's money
just
laundering. I mean,
people, yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's what NFTs are. I mean, that's just money laundering, like like a Bored Ape or whatever. It's not. If Justin Bieber wants to pay $1 million, good for him. It gets him a little press. It's fun, whatever. He doesn't care. He's got millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, he's got.
Some of these other things that were NFTs that were sold, $50 million. That was just money laundering. How do I move money from my left pocket to my right pocket without getting in trouble? No, I bought this thing at auction from myself.
Right.
Oops. Okay. Can't track it because I'm anonymous.
Interesting.
Because there's no other use to it.
Yeah.
There's no store of value. There's no intrinsic value.
No, although to kind of talk on the NFT just a little bit, there's a big market for trading cards. Pokemon, baseball, whatever. There really is. You go look it up.
Of course.
These cards can trade for vast amounts of money.
Yeah.
Now it's tangible, it's in your hand and everything else.
They're real.
The NFTs are supposedly essentially the same thing, but just in digital format. I think that's supposed to be
but that's, not what it is.
Because of the fact that it's not physical and real.
No, because they can be duplicated, right? So, I do a digital picture of this water bottle.
Right.
I can then create an infinite number of NFTs of this water bottle.
Right.
There's no scarcity. There's no value. Has nothing to do with it being physical or not. Just like there's one Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
Right.
So authentication. So there's supposed to be a way to authenticate NFTs. Isn't there?
Supposed to be non-fungible.
But there's no value, right? Like you go to the gift shop at the Louvre. Yeah, of course you can buy a print of the Mona Lisa for $50 or whatever it is. Fine, whatever. But it's worth nothing.
Yeah, you'll never be able to sell it for what the actual Mona Lisa is worth.
You won't be able to sell it for anything.
Yeah.
The value instantly goes to zero. It's only worth $50 because you paid for it because you felt warm and fuzzy because you're in Paris and you're at the Louvre and you feel like spending money on a print.
Yeah.
But it's worth nothing. And they can print 1 million of them.
Yeah.
You can print 1 million NFTs. There is no limit. There's no scarcity and there's no value.
Yeah.
I mean, if you enjoy your collection of NFTs, I guess, like art.
And I think that's what people were getting at was that no bullshit. Especially now I'm going back to metaverse. Right. By the way, have you ever watched that movie? What's the movie everyone talks about when it comes to the metaverse?
Which one? Oh, Ready Player One.
Ready Player One. You ever seen it?
No, I've thought about watching it a few times. I just haven't pulled the trigger on that.
I think it's a Steven Spielberg movie, if I'm not mistaken. Should be.
Whatever it is, it's a pretty brilliant movie.
It's a pretty good movie. It should be Spielberg. You can double check me, Mikey. I appreciate that. But regardless, Ready Player One is essentially taking place in what you can conceptually imagine as the metaverse.
Right.
Okay. So in this digital world that you exist in now, okay, things like an NFT, and especially if it's authenticated, would have relevance and would be something that could be considered like the Mona Lisa in our physical world, but now it's that in the digital world. So it doesn't make sense to us now, I think, because of the fact that it's not really come to fruition and it's not something that we can really, plug into now.
Yeah.
But if that is where we are trending in the future, there could be
sure, but there's still no scarcity, right? So in that world, but I'll just create a different metaverse.
Yeah. Oh man, there we go.
Right, and there's no upper limit, right? Like the reason why property values change and generally go higher is because
there's scarcity of it.
There's scarce. Like Manhattan is only the size of Manhattan.
Yeah,
I'm sure someday there's going to be a conglomerate or a monopoly of metaverses. There's going to be the one big one that everyone wants to be a part of, and you might have a couple little smaller companies, but who wants to go to those? Those are lame, and no one visits those. You know what I mean? And then You know, there's only going to be a limited amount of servers and stuff in the world to power all these mega metaverses. So it's going to be like one of those things where,
but again, who wants that?
I don't know, our grandchildren maybe.
Yeah, who knows? There's no telling.
You know what I'm saying?
You're right. You're certainly people in our generation. Honestly,
No.
I could do because I'm almost done with social media.
But think about this.
The idea of going even further into it is like, oh. But we may be those. We may be the older generation that whenever we were younger, who was shaking their fist at the Sega Genesis and the Nintendos and the the internet.
Yeah, sure,
You know?
sure.
Whenever our grandchildren are our grandparents' age, you know what I mean?
Right.
You know, like, oh, what's the world going to be like then? It's going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah.
Things we haven't even thought of.
Exactly.
Could be possible.
Exactly.
Are going to be possible.
Sure, but I think if you're grounded in some fundamentals and some principles, that's okay. It doesn't have to get away from you. You know, in terms of like talking about crypto and some of the tech stuff, you know, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger at Berkshire Hathaway always get shit on because they're old. Okay, Buffett turns 93 in August and Munger's 99, and the idea is that the argument is weak that they're old, they just don't get it. Okay, maybe, but these are two guys that are with it mentally. They have a lot of experience. They've been very successful, and they do the work.
Yeah.
They do the homework. They like Warren Buffett's probably read more about cryptocurrencies than most 25-year-olds.
Probably more than me. I'll tell you that right now. I haven't
Right.
read nothing about it.
If he sees potential in it, he's going to.
Right. Of
if he
course.
doesn't, they just
Then
blow
he's gonna dismiss it. And I think it wasn't this year. It was last year's annual shareholder meeting. He described it, right. So, and you can look it up. I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere. Not right now because it's like 8 hours of footage.
They do it every year. I've seen them do.
Yeah, and in Omaha, and somebody asked about crypto, and he said, "Look, if you offered me a deal to buy 1% of all the farmland in the United States, you know, whatever that number is, I'll write you a check today for 1%. You know, doesn't matter if it's $50 billion, $100 billion, whatever the number is, that's 1%. I'll buy a 1% stake in all the farmland.
Yeah.
If I could do the same for, you know, rental, residential, real estate, write you a check today.
Yeah.
If you offer, and then he says, if you offered me all the Bitcoin that exists and will ever exist, he wouldn't pay $25 for it because there's no value. Because if he own that, it's a good test. If you own 100% of something, then what?
Right.
So there's no intrinsic value. You can't use it to make something else of value. It doesn't generate any kind of cash flow or income. So it's worth zero. So if you own 100% of Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency, the only way you make any money is if I convince you it's worth more.
And then trade you.
And then
actual dollars for it.
Actual money for it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's a good point. That's a good point. That's a real good point.
I thought it was a good thought experiment that, you know, and it kind of demonstrated once again that the guy is clever and thoughtful, and that these things aren't foreign. Like these guys, you know, between he and Munger, they've seen countless bust booms, you know, frauds, Ponzi's. They've seen it all, and guess what? It's always the same. Yeah. You know, the instrument changes, right? Whether it's crypto or mortgages or railroads or connectivity for the internet, you know, and cables and fiber optic, you know, it's overbuilt, it's over levered. It's, you know, there's always somebody ripping somebody out, you know, there's always grifters, there's always thieves.
Yeah.
It's just the same thing over and over again. And this is that. There's literally zero value. It's worth $28,000 a coin because you will pay $28,000 or whatever it is.
Anything's pretty much worth whatever someone will pay for it, right?
Yeah, to a point. But you know, if somebody, you know, if the house that we're doing this from is worth $400,000, yeah, maybe it's worth that, maybe it isn't. But if you're going to keep living here with your family and you're going to start paying me, $3,000 a month in rent, now we can come up with an agreement on what it's actually worth based on the value it brings, right? The $3,000 a month has to be a good value for you, right? There's a cost to move. Your kids are happy and comfortable here. You stay,
Right.
and you pay the $3,000.
Right.
That's the trade that you're making. I own the house. You paid me. Now I have to make a decision how much I want to pay for the house for that stream of income of $3,000 a month, right? This is just basic, asset valuation, right? A discounted cash flow, or however you want to think about it. There's none of that exists for these things. There is no backing, and I'll just put it out there, like a lot of people will push back and say, well, there's nothing backing the dollar. Right?
Yeah,
fiat currency. I can't go to the treasury and trade it in for
Gold
a bar of gold.
Yeah, what would you do with that shit? But go ahead. Yeah.
And that is true.
Yeah.
I mean, I can go buy gold with my money, but whatever.
Yeah.
It is backed by a lot of things. It's backed by the taxing power of our federal government. That's the cash flow, right? It's backed by all the assets domiciled here in the United States, which is a lot. Hundreds of trillions of dollars worth, probably.
Right.
Plus the tax revenue, plus military might to enforce those property rights and the ability to tax the value and the income derived from those assets, from that property.
It almost sounds very socialistic in a sense. Let me get closer to the mic. It almost sounds very socialistic in a sense that our dollar is valued by certain things like that. You get what I mean?
I mean, I don't think that most people think about it that way. They just say, "Oh, it's a fiat currency. It's worth what somebody."
Yeah, but the way you described it,
I go to the store. I go to the gas station. I pick up a Snickers bar. Like the dollar is worth a Snickers bar, and vice versa, right? And it's worth that because we both agree
that's what it's worth.
That's what I can do with it. It's a medium of exchange. But in reality, it's backed by those other things.
No, and that's what I was trying to say is that it sounds like collectively all of our earning power and tax dollar. With the fact that you said tax is what made me think that. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When you said the tax collecting and everything else, I was like, well, wait. So then all of us in the American society are what's giving the dollar its value. We are the ones who are backing it up. We as the people, we as the taxpayers.
Yeah, at some level, of course.
We're the ones who are saying the dollar's worth this. And I'm sure the global markets have some influence,
Well, yeah, I mean, right. I mean, that's another Buffett-ism, right? Like in the short term, markets are voting machines. In the long term, they're weighing machines. In other words, day to day, or when things are very transactional, that's going to make prices fluctuate. Mm-hmm. Over the long term, like fundamentals and value drive prices. That's the difference.
Right.
So if there's some surge in imports or exports, it's going to impact the value of the dollar versus other currencies.
Right.
But over a long period of time, these other fundamentals will dominate.
Yeah.
Right. You have noise. Right. You have the noise, but then you have like the longer term trend and whatever you're looking at.
Right. It was almost like that graph that we just seen from Ray Dalio, the productivity growth.
Right.
And
the short term and long term trends and cycles
versus the productivity growth, the GDP.
Yeah.
Of our nation.
Right. How did our GDP do today?
Right.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Right. Maybe it was a down day. I don't know. Maybe we did worse today than we did a year ago. I don't know. But maybe the trend for the year, for the decade, is meaningfully higher. Right.
Does Fred.gov show any of that?
Yeah. I mean, you can pull data on anything on GDP. Now, some of these things are reported, with different frequencies. Some things are weekly, some things are monthly, quarterly, So, I mean, there'll only be so much
information
there, but it's pretty robust. And it doesn't just chart it. You can actually you can download it into an Excel file. So
really?
you can fiddle with the numbers if you want to.
Just for hypotheticals?
Yeah, I mean, like you can eyeball the chart and you'd be like, well, what was the actual low point? And you try to hover and it's 1968, but maybe it's 1967. You can't really
I see what
say.
you mean. I see what you mean.
So you actually rip the data, and then you can search for the min point over that period or whatever, and say, oh yeah, no, it was December of 1967. It wasn't January.
That's
whatever.
pretty intense. So back to GDP real quick. GDP, from what I understand, is supposed to be what a country produces, right? And I know we're getting real basic here or whatever, but there was once some sort of speculation that we don't produce anything, and I kind of thought to myself that was kind of weird to hear that statement, and that we are just a consumer-based economy. But then I got to, after researching some of the things that, looking up the things that you have shown, isn't all economies consumer based? And aren't they all buying the products of,
Yes.
what we're supposed to be producing? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. So there's components to our GDP. Consumer spending accounts for about 2/3, maybe 70%. Right. The rest is, corporate, like CapEx, investment, and government spending.
Okay.
So it tilts heavy toward consumer spending, right? I buy this laptop, and somebody made that laptop, right? And that fits in there somewhere, right? There's different methodologies for calculating it, but at the end of the day, you're right? And so for me to buy this, somebody had to make it. If they made it, they've created output.
Got it.
That is recognized when I buy the thing from them.
Right.
Now, where the U.S. gets in trouble sometimes, or perceived to be in trouble, is our balance between imports and export. Right? We don't produce anything. We don't make anything here. It's factually incorrect. We make a lot of things in the United States,
right?
But and a lot of what we make is intangible, right?
Like what?
Like design, research. Our economy is very services heavy, right? I provide guidance to a wealthy family on how to invest their money.
Sure.
What did I sell?
Yeah.
There's no widget. There's no thing.
Yeah. There's no tangible thing.
There's no tangible thing, and so there's other intangibles, right?
Right.
Software that can be duplicated and used throughout, right? Like or a drug, so Pfizer makes a new drug, or Lilly makes a new drug, and it takes them 6 years, and they spend $4 billion on it, but then the actual pill itself costs nothing.
Right.
They already did the work. So what are they selling? Are they selling the pill, or are they selling the $4 billion of research and development and marketing?
It's got to be that.
Is Microsoft selling, they're selling software, but like nothing moves anymore. There's no disk.
It's all uploaded,
Right?
downloaded.
It's a subscription now.
Yeah.
So for $80 a year, I have the most up to date,
Microsoft,
Office or whatever. Right? It's very intangible. It's services. It's processes. We've mentioned Coca-Cola a few times. They are not in the business of selling sugary water. That's what the product physically is, but what they do well is logistics and branding. Touch those. There's nothing to touch, right? Coca-Cola is sold in like 200 countries and territories. Well, guess what? If you're in, I don't know, someplace you've never heard of,
yeah,
and you can buy a Coca-Cola, and everyone along that supply line, made money.
Yeah.
How'd they do that?
Yeah, because it took something to get that Coca-Cola there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So, and the guy at the point of sale isn't going to sell it to me unless he made money.
Yeah.
His supplier isn't going to sell it to him unless they've made money.
Yeah.
So the logistics and the systems and processes in place are extremely valuable. It's not on their balance sheet.
Right.
There's nothing to touch, but we make that. We have the expertise to understand those things. We're good at business. We're good at services.
Got it.
And we also make stuff too. We get into trouble with current account, with balances, imports versus exports. Yeah, we consume a lot, and we buy things from overseas, and we run and we run imbalances. But we all do. right? We all do in our life, right? So, if you think about, I teach at the University of Houston. They buy my service, and they run a huge deficit with me. I don't buy anything from the University of Houston.
No.
So the current account deficit is gigantic. But then I take the money and I go to HEB and I spend, $20,000 a year at HEB on groceries.
That sounds about right, by the way.
Right? But what is HEB buying from me, right? So at some level, as you zoom out, those current accounts are all going to zero out, right? It doesn't come from outer space. So I can run a surplus with U of H and a deficit with HEB, and that's what we do, right? We buy BMWs and Mercedes and Audis. And we buy and we buy LG, and we buy Samsung, and we buy all this stuff,
which are Korean companies.
Yeah. So I look at my account every month. I do my accounting, and my credits and my debits are always equal.
Right.
Hey, talk about being transparent. We're right there with each other. That's that hand to mouth you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What's funny
but some of those, debits and credits are going into savings.
Absolutely.
Things like,
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
But it always equals out.
It does always equal out. I think you're winning. I think you can consider yourself winning if you have some of those, especially a lot of those debits going to, am I saying debit? The ones going to your savings accounts, okay? Those. Yeah. If you got those going there, okay, and you're balancing out at the end of the month, you're doing all right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because as long as you're making sure that savings is taking place,
right,
you're going to be where you need to be. So you don't have to be too hard on yourself. But I think all of us still want to have that shoebox full of money somewhere underneath the bed. You know what I mean? We still want to have some of that on hand.
Or in a safe or something.
Yeah, at any point in time. You know what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, well then I guess the American economy is not as terrible as everyone seems to make it. Wants to make it out to be. Yeah, wants to make it out to be. Hey, it's the game that we're playing. It's the structure that we're in.
Yeah.
Do the things that you know to do to you can succeed.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be.
So, I mean, I know we're wrapping it up here probably in, close to the 3-hour mark. So, I mean, do you have any last words, any advice, anything that you would like to offer the audience here?
Yeah, I mean, focus on the things you can control, like I mentioned before. Try to be disciplined, whether that's with your diet or with your money. It's similar principles. And, keep learning, right? Watch informative things. Think critically about what you're listening to, what you're reading. Apply it and use some common sense, I guess, if that's a word.
That is a word. That's a word that's lost on people.
Yeah. And in terms of I don't know, maybe there's a reasonably new, I don't know, I guess it's a few years old now, book that's I think is pretty helpful. It's a personal finance book, but it's not nuts and bolts. It's more philosophy and perspective and psychology. It's called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel.
Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel?
Yes.
How do you spell Housel?
Housel is his last name.
Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel.
Yeah. So, I think it was published probably 2 or 3 years ago, and it's got a lot of good takes. It's not telling you, put $6,000 in an IRA. It's not specific.
Yeah, right.
It's a good overview of human behavior and how that impacts decisions about money.
Nice.
And I've read it twice, and I think it's good. And it's funny, I saw the author Morgan Housel on a podcast that they were recording.
Nice.
And the book is done so much better than he anticipated.
Really?
Yeah. So I think when he wrote it, and he got the publishing deal or whatever, I don't know, 50,000 copies or something, which would be pretty good for kind of a niche thing.
Yeah.
And I think on the podcast he said that he was at 3 million.
From the first 50,000,
Yeah,
the demand came to 3 million.
Yeah,
and he's fulfilled
so
it.
he thought tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, and it's
Yeah.
literally been an order of magnitude more popular. He did mention that he sells the the Audible or audiobook version basically 2 to 1, which makes sense.
Yeah, it does, because that's what people are ingesting more is the audiobooks.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
But yeah, excellent book, a game changer. I think it caught on because it's not super niche where we're talking about like, credit cards or Roth versus this or that. It's not technical. Like anyone can read this book.
Yeah.
And it will resonate with a wide audience.
Good. We definitely need to look into that. I'll probably look into it myself. Probably buy the audiobook and listen to it myself.
Yeah,
it's good.
Same with that Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's a good one.
Yeah. Hey man,
That's what I've heard.
Exactly right. I just YouTubed it. That's
Yeah,
all.
no.
I mean, who knows? I'll probably go to this first before I do the Rich Dad Poor Dad.
The one I did read, I think, was The Millionaire Mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Hey, let me ask you something real quick. When it comes to finances, because I do most of my finances as far as like, looking like the actual dollars of what's coming in and what's going out. I kind of just do it on freaking Apple Notes. Like I have my income and debt that shows what I got on my checkings and all my different accounts, what I got on my credit cards. I've even gone so far as to put it, break down even credit card spending and stuff. I guess what I'm trying to get at by saying all of that is if you can put a visual on what it is that you're spending, will that help with certain things? And will that help? I say spending, saving, anything, all aspects of your finance. Sure. If you put a visual representation to it, charts and graphs.
Yeah,
things
that helps most people, I think, to try to make it a little bit more tangible and a little bit more real. I mean, if you there's personal finance people out there that tell you to like do the envelope thing, right? Like
I don't know that one.
Well, so you literally take cash out.
Oh, okay.
And you have your rent envelope, you have your car payment envelope, you have your grocery, and it's real. Okay, there's car envelope has $600 in it. Like the car can't be 605 because you have 600. Like
I got you.
The groceries are $500. For however long. Like this is what it is, and it makes it more tangible. You can physically see that the funds are dwindling.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Right, so it makes it real, so people will stick to it. Hopefully,
I just didn't know if that maybe you might chart or graph any of your expenses with a certain program or anything like that.
Yeah, I personally don't. Everything is automated, so if I want it, it can easily be aggregated.
Right.
But I try to keep things as simple as possible.
Yeah, that's how I do mine too. That's how come I can look at all that, because I listened to a podcast, The Art of Manliness, and it had Ramit Sethi on there. And he was the one who I can teach you how to be rich or something like that. And he talked about automating your finances.
Yeah, that's the whole.
That was some really good advice.
Right. That's his whole message. Automate things, and then focus on what your priorities are. Right. So, if this one activity or item is very important to you, spend it. Spend the money on it. Buy it.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Everything else be unbelievably cheap about.
Yeah.
Right, like if you don't care about like what your shirt or your shoes, like be cheap.
Yeah.
If you care about vacation, spend a lot. Align your finances with what your priorities or your preferences are. That's all. That's what he's saying. And then in the meantime, automate everything so that you are in control.
So you can do that.
Yeah.
Be in control.
It's good advice.
I like it.
Well, cool. Well, like I said, we're gonna post all the links to everything on the descriptions. And thank you, Craig, for
absolutely.
For joining
thank you.
us. This was fun, very enlightening, and very informative. Hopefully, for everyone listening too.
Yeah, agreed.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, and on that note, I think we're gonna play a commercial from EasyCoin as our exit. So, Mikey J,
no, he didn't.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
Talk of All Trades is sponsored in part by EasyCoin. EasyCoin is a cryptocurrency that looks to change the world by changing the way we view crypto. Our goal is to make it easy for everyone with our user-friendly interfaces, cutting-edge technology, and educational videos to teach the world that cryptocurrency doesn't have to be difficult. In fact, it can be downright easy. So head on over to myeasycoin.com to learn more.